Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. How's the weather where you are today? Still having trouble sleeping? Let these mysterious stories help you drift off. Feel free to send us your own creepy experiences, and don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a new video. I really love doing this, just sitting here with my mic, helping you relax after a long day. Thanks as always for listening. You know, my dad grew up in this tiny village in rural Poland, not long after communism fell. It was the kind of place where the houses were old, the money was short, and people carried their herd around like extra weight on their backs. A lot of families were rough. Hard lives turned into hard hands and hard words. But my dad, Piotr, well, let's call him Piotr. He always had this one bright thing in his life, the forest. He told me he started going mushroom picking when he was about 4. Just this little kid, wandering under these huge dark trees with a basket that was almost bigger than him. He knew every path, every clearing, every crooked birch. He used to say, I could walk that forest blindfolded and still find my way home. And honestly, I believe him. When I was little, he'd tuck me into bed and tell me stories about that same forest. How he'd race his friends through the undergrowth, how he'd hide from chores between roots of ancient trees, how the moss there was so soft it felt like a pillow. That forest was his playground, his hiding place, his whole universe. But then, there's this other side to it. I remember one evening, must have been around when I was 12 or 13. It was late summer, still warm. My dad, my aunt, let's call her Aunt Kasia, and my dad's friend Radoslav were sitting on these old plastic chairs outside our house. They were drinking beer, talking about nothing and everything, and I was just there on the steps, pretending to be invisible so they wouldn't send me to bed. You know how it is when there's alcohol on the table. The stories start to loosen up. At some point they drifted into talking about weird places in the world. You know, the kind of talk that starts with, "You wouldn't believe this, but..." And then my aunt said something about those parts of the countryside where things aren't right. No explanation, no details, just that heavy tone adults use when they're talking about something they don't fully understand. Then my dad goes, very casually, I saw the devil in that forest once. So did Mama. He meant my grandma. Let's call her Helena. I remember going cold all over. I just blurted out, what do you mean, the devil? Like, a ghost? Some animal? What? He laughed a little, but it wasn't his usual laugh. It sounded embarrassed? Nervous? He said, no, not with horns and a tail. Where we're from, seeing the devil is what we call those moments when the world stops making sense. When something happens that just shouldn't. No explanation. Just wrong. And then he told me this story. He was about 17, maybe 18. He just started seeing my mom. She lived in this small town about an hour away by bike, and he used to visit her whenever he could. On this particular day, he stayed too long. You know, first love. The kind where you keep saying, I should go, and then don't move. By the time he finally got on his bike, the sky was already heavy and dark, like it was thinking about a storm. The road home cut straight through that forest he knew so well. He'd ridden it hundreds of times, no big deal. Partway through the forest, the sky just opened up. He told me the rain went from nothing to absolutely pouring in seconds. The kind where it feels like someone tipped a bucket over your head. The path turned slick, his clothes stuck to his skin, and his bike chain suddenly jumped and jammed. Just like that, broken, no way to ride. So he got off the bike, swore a little under his breath, and started pushing it along the path. The trees were so thick that the light disappeared even though it wasn't that late yet. The rain was slamming down so hard it hurt his face, so he lowered his head, watching his feet, just following the path in front of him. After a few minutes of walking like that, he lifted his head again, and the path was gone. Not like, oh, I must have drifted a little. Gone. No trail, No wheel marks, no familiar turn in the trees, just dense, dark forest in every direction. He stopped dead. He tried to retrace his steps, but there was nothing to retrace. He spun around, searching for something familiar, a stump, a fallen tree, anything he recognized from a lifetime of walking that forest, and he just couldn't. He said that was the first time in his life he truly understood what it meant to be lost. The craziest part? He could still hear cars, somewhere far off, through the trees. So he knew the road was nearby, had to be. He kept trying to walk towards the sound, but the road never came closer. The rain was so loud it kept swallowing everything, and it was getting darker and colder, and he was soaked through, shivering, completely turned around. This is stupid, he kept telling himself. I grew up here. I know this place. I can't be lost here. But he was. He said it felt like forever, like he was trapped in a loop between the same trees, walking in circles, the forest pressing in on him. Time didn't feel right. It stretched and folded and twisted until his thoughts got all tangled. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the rain stopped. Not gradually, not a drizzle dying out. One moment it was hammering down, and the next, silence. Just water dripping from leaves. He blinked, took a few more steps, and there, right in front of him, was the path. Clear as day. The same path he'd been walking minutes before, like it had been there the whole time. He followed it out, shaking, pushing his bike. The road appeared. The forest ended. He walked into the yard at home, soaked, exhausted, and kind of angry. My grandma, Helena, was in the kitchen. My Aunt Kasia was there too. When they saw him dripping in the doorway, they started laughing, like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. He snapped, "It's not funny. I got stuck in that damn forest for almost 40 minutes in that storm." My grandma stopped laughing. She looked at the clock on the wall. Then she gave my aunt this look, the kind of knowing look family members share when they're thinking the same unsettling thought. Finally, she said, "What are you talking about? That heavy rain didn't even last 10 minutes. My dad froze. He checked the time himself. Outside the forest, in the normal world, the storm had been short and sharp. Inside the forest, for him, it felt like nearly 3 times as long. That's when he said it, quietly, more to himself than to them. "I must have seen the devil then." And my grandma just nodded, like she'd been expecting that, because it had happened to her too. Years earlier, she'd gone into the same forest on a bright, cold autumn afternoon. You know the kind of day. Sharp air, golden leaves, that nice crunch under your boots. She went in to collect mushrooms, like everyone did. She'd known that forest longer than my dad had been alive. She used to say she could walk it in her sleep. And yet, at some point, she looked up and realized she had no idea where she was. No path. No familiar landmarks. The trees all looked wrong, even though they were the same trees she'd been walking past for decades. For her, it was the opposite of my dad's experience. Time didn't stretch, it vanished. She said it felt like she'd just stepped off the road, wandered a little, and then found the path again. But when she got home, she was hours late. The sun was almost gone. People had started to worry, and apparently, if you talk to people from that area long enough, you hear more of these stories. Not dramatic hauntings, not clear apparitions, just these strange pockets of wrongness, like the forest decides, for a little while, to stop playing by our rules. I've been to that forest many times myself. Most days, it's just a forest. Smells like damp earth and pine, soft moss under your shoes, birds calling, insects buzzing. Beautiful in a quiet, stubborn way. But there are spots, just a few, where something in me tightens, where the silence feels too thick, where I suddenly feel like I'm walking on a stage and someone I can't see is watching from the dark. Nothing happens to me there. No voices, no shadows, no disappearing paths. But every time I think about my dad, soaked and panicking in the rain, and my grandma, calm and steady, but somehow losing hours in the sunshine, I get chills. And I think about that phrase they use back there, in that little Polish countryside, seeing the devil. Not a creature, not a face. Just that moment when the world you know reaches out, twists the rules, and reminds you that maybe, just maybe, you don't understand it as well as you thought. So, let me tell you about something that happened last winter in this little mountain town called Devgar. A group of us had gone there for a 4-day break. You know the kind of trip where everyone swears they just want to chill? And then somehow you've planned sunrise hikes, waterfalls, and 7 different viewpoints. Anyway, on the second morning, my friend Lena shook me awake at around 3:30 a.m. "Get up," she whispered. "We'll miss the sunrise." I was half asleep, but I'd promised her we'd go to this viewpoint deep inside the forest. Our other friend, Kabir, just rolled himself tighter into the blanket and mumbled, "You two are mad," and refused to move. So it ended up just being the two of us. We layered up as best as we could. Hoodies, beanies, that one extra pair of socks you always regret not packing enough of. The air outside was biting. You could actually see our breath as we walked out of the guest house. The trail started right after the last row of houses. The moment we left the dim yellow streetlights behind, it was like walking into a different world. The path was marked, but completely empty. No other tourists, no locals, nothing. Just us. The forest there was dense. The trees were tall and bent slightly over the trail, like they were eavesdropping on us. Every step we took made the dry leaves crackle so loudly, it felt like the whole mountain could hear us. And apart from that sound, there was nothing. No birds, no insects, no distant engines. Just this heavy silence pressing in from all sides. We were following these wooden signboards that pointed toward Sunrise Point. And you know how, when you're tired, you keep checking the map, hoping you're almost there. That was us. But something weird started happening. Every time we checked the map on Lena's phone, the little blue dot had moved, but the viewpoint didn't seem to get any closer. It was like it was sliding away from us as we walked. We'd cover a good stretch of the trail, check again, and somehow it was still 25 minutes away. At first, we laughed it off. Bad network, glitchy GPS, typical. But slowly, that joke stopped being funny. Somewhere along the way, I got this feeling, this really strong feeling, that we weren't alone. Not like, oh, maybe there are other people on the trail, but like something was watching us from the trees. You know when the hair on the back of your neck stands up for no logical reason? It was like that. When we stopped to check the map again, Lena zoomed out a little, and that's when we noticed it. The route we were taking went right past 2 places we hadn't seen mentioned anywhere in the Things to Do in Devgar guides. On one side of the trail, hidden behind the trees, was a Hindu cremation ground. On the other side, a really old graveyard, Parsi according to the map. Neither of us said anything for a few seconds, and then I just muttered, "Oh." It's funny how the mood shifts instantly once you know where you are. The same trees suddenly felt closer. The same silence started feeling heavier. Some parts of the trail had those weak, flickering streetlights, but most of it was swallowed by darkness. The kind of darkness where your torch only shows you a small circle, and everything beyond it feels like it's waiting. We thought about turning back right then. That's when the dogs appeared. One moment, it was just the two of us on the trail. The next moment, 4 dogs stepped out of the shadows, as if they'd been waiting just off the path. 2 walked ahead of us, side by side. The other 2 fell in behind us. We froze. I honestly thought they might attack us. They were big, and street dogs in a strange town at that hour. Your mind goes to worst-case scenarios pretty quickly. But they didn't growl. They didn't bare their teeth. They just walked with us. Whenever we stopped, they stopped and turned around to look at us like, "Why are you pausing? Come on." And every now and then, when there was a rustle somewhere in the forest, one of them would let out this sharp bark in that direction. Short, warning barks, like they were telling something to stay away. Lena whispered, "Are they escorting us?" I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Yeah, our 4 a.m. security team." We walked like that for a while. 2 dogs leading, us in the middle, 2 dogs behind us, guarding. Then, all of a sudden, the road just ended. No signboard, no barrier, nothing. The concrete path faded out, and ahead of us was just pure black. Not normal darkness. This felt like walking into nothing, like even the air ahead was thicker. We shone our phone flashlights forward, but the light didn't seem to touch anything. It just faded out into the dark. And that's when all 4 dogs started barking. Not normal barking. Their bodies tensed, fur raised, teeth bared at the darkness in front of us. They kept lunging a little, stopping, then barking again, staring at that one empty spot like there was something there we couldn't see. There was nothing in front of us. At least, nothing we could make out. But their reaction, it was so intense, so violent, that something in my chest just screamed, "Don't go there." Lena grabbed my arm and said, "We're not doing this. We're going back." I didn't argue. We turned around. The moment we did, the dogs quietened down and fell into formation again, 2 in front, 2 at the back, and started walking with us, back the way we'd come. That walk back felt longer. The trail was the same, but every shadow felt sharper now, every creak of a branch louder. Every time I glanced back, the dog behind me would look up at me like, "Keep moving." And somehow that made me feel like as long as they were there, we'd reach somewhere safe. Finally, we saw the first faint outline of houses, windows, a parked scooter, a lonely streetlight that had no right to make me as emotional as it did. The dog stayed with us all the way till we reached the small town square, the center of Devgar. It was around 5:45 a.m. by then. The sky was just beginning to lighten into that dull, bluish gray you get before sunrise, but the streets were still empty. Not a single person around. We sat on a low wall near a closed tea stall, exhausted, trying to process what had just happened. The 4 dogs sat down with us. Not restless, not whining, just sitting, waiting. Like they somehow knew we weren't completely out yet. Around 6 a.m., an old bakery across the street finally opened its shutters. We went in, bought a packet of glucose biscuits, came out and fed the dogs. They ate calmly, tails wagging, eyes soft. I remember thinking, okay, maybe they really were just kind, clever dogs. Just then, this man on horseback trotted past us. Yes, an actual horse. Apparently, he offered rides up the same route for tourists once there was enough light. Lena and I looked at each other, and for some reason, maybe to reassure ourselves, we turned back to look at the dogs. They were gone. All 4 of them. Not walking away, not at the corner, not under a parked car. Just gone. 1 second they were there, close enough to touch. The next, nothing. No sound, no paw steps, no collars jingling. We never saw them again. Not that day, not the next morning, not anywhere in town. When I got back home after the trip and told my mom about it, she got really quiet. Then she said, "You know, at night, there are things that move around freely. Things that don't mean you well." She looked straight at me and asked, "There were only two of you. What if something had tried to possess one of you? What would you have done then?" And I swear to you, even now, just repeating that question gives me chills. I don't know what was waiting for us at the end of that broken road. I don't know why the map wouldn't let us get closer, or why those dogs vanished the moment someone else appeared to escort us. All I know is this. That night, in that forest, under that strange, heavy sky, those weren't just dogs. So, I've only ever had one experience that felt anything like time travel, and it still gives me goosebumps when I talk about it. This was, maybe 12 years ago now? Back then, I had this long commute, about 45 miles each way, cutting across the southeast of England. Most mornings I'd be driving through rolling countryside, and on that route, there's this really beautiful reservoir. On a sunny day, it looks like a postcard. At the time, I was using this old, slightly battered TomTom sat-nav I'd borrowed from a friend. It was notorious for glitching out. It would freeze, randomly recalculate, forget where it was, but it was all I had, so I just put up with it. Anyway, on this particular day, the sat-nav tells me to go a way I don't usually take. It directs me down this narrow, tree-lined country lane I'd never really noticed before, supposedly heading toward the reservoir. I thought, fine, shortcut, why not? And followed it. Partway down, the sat-nav does its usual thing and just dies. Screen frozen, no sound, nothing. But this lane doesn't have any turnings or junctions, just hedges and trees on either side. So I figure I'll keep going straight, and it'll sort itself out eventually. Then I break through the trees, and suddenly I'm driving into this tiny little hamlet. Maybe 5 or 6 houses at most. Old cottages with stone walls, front gardens full of flowers, that sort of thing. There are no cars parked anywhere, no driveways crammed with SUVs, nothing. Instead, there are kids actually playing in the road, running around, kicking a ball, skipping with a rope. It hit me how strangely peaceful it felt. No traffic noise, no hum of the modern world. Just the sound of children laughing and a dog barking somewhere. For a moment, I remember thinking, this feels like I've gone back in time. The clothes the kids were wearing looked old-fashioned, I guess. Little wool cardigans, short trousers, those kind of long socks you only ever see in old photos. It all felt oddly out of place, but at the same time I was confused because something wasn't right. I knew I should have been close to the reservoir by then, but there was no sign of it. No water, no dam, nothing. Just this village in a valley that absolutely should have been dominated by a massive body of water. I drove slowly through, half expecting to see a sign I recognized, but there wasn't one. No road markings I recognized either. Then, just as I passed the last cottage, the sat-nav suddenly came back to life. The screen flickered, beeped, and it recalculated the route. Within another minute or two, I was spat out onto a larger road I knew really well, the kind of road I could have driven in my sleep. As soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, okay, I know where I am now, and carried on home like it was nothing. The next day, though, I was curious. I thought I'd try to go the same way again and see that little hamlet in daylight properly. So I watched the signs carefully, tried to spot that same turnoff, and I just couldn't find it. No narrow lane, no gap in the trees. It was as if the road had vanished overnight. Still, I didn't obsess about it. I took another route, got to work, and eventually it sort of faded into the background of my mind. Just a weird day with a dodgy sat-nav, right? One day I thought, you know what? I'm going to find it. It has to be there somewhere. I must have just missed the turning all these years. So I sat down with Google Maps and started tracing the area around the reservoir, zooming in, looking for that lane. A little country road through trees that connects to a cluster of a few houses. But I couldn't find it. No matter how closely I looked, there was no sign of any such junction. No tiny lane that could have led the way I remembered. The major road was there, the reservoir was there, but the little road? Just not on the map. That's when things started to feel properly odd. Later on, I ended up chatting with someone local who knew the history of the place. They told me that, back in the late 1960s, the reservoir had been created by buying up a village in the valley, moving all the residents out, and then flooding the whole area. The original village is literally under the water now, and that's when it hit me. I started replaying that day in my mind. The lack of cars, the strange quiet, the old-fashioned clothes, no sign of the reservoir where it absolutely should have been. And this tiny, vivid hamlet that I've never been able to find again, on the ground or on a map. I honestly, hand on heart, believe that, for a brief moment, I drove into that village before the reservoir existed. That somehow, because my sat-nav glitched, or the road was just right, or who knows why, I slipped sideways in time, just a little, and saw the place as it once was. I know how that sounds, I really do. If someone told me this, I'd probably try to come up with a rational explanation. Bad memory, a different village, some odd detour I've forgotten. But the thing is, the memory is incredibly clear. I remember the angle of the sunlight, the way the kids paused to look at my car, the exact feeling of, something's not quite right here. It doesn't feel like a dream or a muddled memory. It feels completely real. So, that's my one and only time travel story. I drove through a village that shouldn't exist anymore, and I haven't been able to find it since. So, hey, I'm Sam. I still live with my parents, and yesterday I kinda stormed out of the house after this small argument with my dad. Nothing dramatic, no screaming match or anything, just one of those tense moments where everyone's a little tired and nobody's really listening. I'd already been planning to pack a bag anyway. I'd seen this short-term job posting at a warehouse about half an hour, maybe 35 minutes, from home. My money situation's all over the place, not exactly stable, and since my older sister, Mia, and my younger brother, Jordan, both work full-time, my dad's always running around, and my mom doesn't drive. I just felt like, maybe it was time I took on more responsibility. My plan was to book a cheap hostel near the job for a few nights. Nothing fancy, just somewhere to sleep while I tried to get my feet under me. But there was one big problem. I lost my wallet. And not just some slim little card holder either. This is a chunky, beat-up brown wallet that you can spot from across the room. The last place I remember seeing it was on the coffee table in the living room. 2 days ago, I put it there, and the next day, gone. I asked everyone if they'd seen it. Hey Mia, you seen my wallet? Nope. Jordan? Nah, man. Mom? Dad? No, we haven't touched it. At first I didn't panic because I misplaced stuff all the time. I used to lose lighters, keys, everything, especially back when I was smoking a lot. But I've been sober for 7 months now. No weed, no pills, no nothing. So I've been trying to tell myself I'm getting more organized. Still, I looked everywhere. Under the couch cushions, under my bed, in pockets of jackets I forgot I owned. Nothing. And without my wallet, my ID, my bank card, I couldn't book the hostel or even a normal room anywhere. So I just gave up on the job. Stayed home. Fast forward to earlier today. I'm lying on the couch in the family room, kind of half watching some random show on TV. My mom, her name's Elena, is sitting across from me on the other couch, scrolling on her phone. I stretch out, roll onto my stomach, and start drifting off. You know that state that's not quite dreaming, but you're not awake either? like the edges of everything get fuzzy. All of a sudden, in that half-asleep place, I felt someone press down on my back, like they were kneeling on me. In my mind, I saw my mom on top of me, holding a syringe, leaning over like she was injecting something into my shoulder. The weirdest part? It was like I was watching it from outside my own body, like I was floating above the couch, watching the whole thing happen to me. In that moment, I felt this mix of fear and confusion, like, is this real? Am I dreaming? Then my eyes snapped open, and there she was, my mom, still sitting in the exact same spot as before, across from me, just staring at me quietly. No syringe, no movement, just watching. For a second I thought about saying something like, "Hey, did you just come over here?" But I didn't. I just lay there, heart pounding, trying to act normal. I've had strange experiences before, paranormal stuff, or at least things that felt paranormal at the time. And I've also been diagnosed with schizophrenia in the past. It's been a while since anything intense happened, though, so I've kind of been living like that part of my life was in the rearview mirror. So I'm lying there thinking, okay, maybe this is just my brain. Maybe this is just that half-dream state messing with me. So part of me started wondering, what if something else is going on? About an hour later, I ended up back on the same couch in the family room. My mom and Mia were upstairs. Jordan was rattling around in the kitchen. My dad, Luis, was down in the basement working on something, and our cat, Noodle, was sitting on the windowsill, doing that little tail flick thing cats do when they're staring at nothing. I was on my back this time, phone on my chest, lights dimmer than before. I could feel myself drifting off again, and right as I was about to go under, I saw it. In the doorway of the family room, there was this dark shadow figure. Not just a blur, like a shape. It looked like a person with a small, round afro. It was standing there, facing me, almost like it was trying to decide whether to step closer. Its outline kept glitching, like bad video buffering, flickering in and out, jerking slightly left, then right. It moved in these short, quick bursts that didn't feel natural, like it existed on a different frame rate than everything else in the room. And I swear, I could feel it looking at me. The second I forced my eyes open all the way, it vanished. No footsteps, no sound, just gone. And I went through the list in my head. Could it be Jordan? No, he's got long twists, not an afro. My dad? No, he's bald. My mom? She was upstairs. Mia? Also upstairs. Nobody in my house looks like what I saw. My heart was racing, but I just stayed still, staring at the doorway, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, or I was in that weird sleepy state again. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was the family group chat. Mia. Who left 2 water bottles on the stairs? I almost slipped. Jordan replied right away. Not me. I typed back. I've been in the family room this whole time. And that's true. I hadn't moved. Could it have been me earlier in the day? Maybe. I do forget things. But I also realized I hadn't even had any water that day. No bottles, no cups, nothing. That's when everything sort of piled up in my head at once. The missing wallet that was just gone from the table. The strange, almost physical feeling of my mom kneeling on my back with that needle. In my mind, but so vivid. The shadow figure with the afro glitching in the doorway. The random water bottles on the stairs that nobody would own up to. The heavy, drained feeling that doesn't make sense given how clean I've been. And I just sat there, staring at the doorway, with this knot in my chest, thinking, is this my illness talking again? Is this my brain misfiring, making ghosts out of shadows? Or is there actually something off in this house right now? Some kind of energy shift that I'm picking up on? I don't have a neat answer, I wish I did. All I know is, I was ready to leave for a few days. Get that job, stay somewhere else, reset my head a little. Then my wallet vanished, and I got stuck here. And now the house feels different, heavier. Like there's something sitting just outside the edge of what I can see. Maybe it really is just my mind playing old tricks on me. Maybe it's stress. Maybe it's sleep. But when I close my eyes, I still see that shadow in the doorway, glitching like bad reception, just watching. So, last night was rough. Our puppy Pumpkin passed away from parvo. And just 5 days before that, his brother Nori died from the same thing. I still can't really believe I'm saying that out loud. For some context, they were still a bit too young for their full set of vaccines, and my wife and I had been talking about where to take them for their shots. We had this plan. Okay, next week, we'll both be off. We'll take them in together. But the week we were supposed to go, they'd already started showing signs of parvo. It all happened so fast. Last week, Pumpkin and Nori just weren't themselves. They didn't want to play. They weren't eating, barely drinking. Normally, they were these little tornadoes of chaos in the living room, but suddenly they were just quiet. My dad took them to the vet and came back with a bag full of meds and fluids, and this look on his face that told me before he even said anything. They tested positive for parvo. The vet explained there's no real cure, just supportive care and time, and that it was basically a coin flip, 50-50 whether they'd make it. I'm a nurse, my wife Lena is a nurse, and my sister Mia is a nurse too. We'd been through this before. Their mom had parvo 3 years ago, and we nursed her back from the edge. She's healthy and spoiled rotten now. So we thought, okay, we can do this again. We know what to do. We gave Pumpkin and Nori their meds on schedule, coaxed them to eat and drink, gave them subcutaneous fluids. We watched every tiny change like hawks. One extra lick of water, a slightly stronger tail wag, anything. Over the next couple of days they were weak, but we thought we were seeing little signs of improvement. My wife and I talked about taking them to an animal ER as a last resort, but the closest one to us had shut down recently, and the next closest, we'd had a really awful experience there before. So we decided to keep doing everything we could at home and stayed hopeful it wouldn't come to that. A few mornings ago, I woke up and went to check on Pumpkin. He was lying in his crate, and he was so weak. He tried to lift his head and couldn't, but his tail thumped when he saw me. That tail wag just broke me. We tried to give him his meds, but he couldn't keep anything down. I work in critical care, and I knew, deep down, that we were past what the animal ER could realistically do. So I stayed with him. I sat on the floor next to his crate, talked to him, told him he was a good boy, scratched that spot behind his ear he loved. I stayed with Pumpkin until he took his last breath. Nori, somehow, seemed to be doing better at first. He started drinking water on his own. He walked a bit, even tried to do a little wobbly play bow. We let ourselves hope. Then yesterday morning, I woke up to my sister standing in the doorway, holding Nori in her arms. And I knew immediately. He had that same look Pumpkin had, that same limpness. We did what we could. I sat with them for as long as I could before I had to leave for work. While I was at work, I kept checking my phone. Messages trickled in, updates from my sister, from my dad. Around 5 a.m., my dad sent the message I'd been dreading. Nori had passed too. I felt numb. It was like the house had suddenly gone quiet in a way I didn't recognize. This morning, something happened that I can't stop thinking about. I had this dream, so vivid, which is strange because I almost never remember my dreams. And there was Nori. He was right at our feet, wagging his tail like crazy, spinning in those little happy circles he used to do when he was excited. He looked healthy, bright-eyed, full of energy. It felt real. I could almost hear his nails tapping on the floor. Then my alarm went off for work, and I woke up with this wave of emotion. Sad, but also weirdly comforted. I just started crying. Lena woke up next to me, and I told her about the dream, how I saw Nori doing his happy spins. She got quiet, and then said she dreamed about Pumpkin, about him running up to her, all bouncy and goofy, like he used to be. We just lay there, holding each other, both of us crying until we had nothing left. No words, just that shared grief, and this tiny thread of comfort that maybe, somehow, they were okay. After I finally got up, I prayed for them. I told them I was sorry, that we loved them so much, that we tried everything. And I asked, wherever they are now, whatever that looks like, I hope they're together, chasing each other, chewing on the same toy they always fought over. So, yeah. Rest in peace, Pumpkin and Nori. Thank you for visiting us one last time. So, I'm just going to talk to you like I would to a friend, okay? Because this story is heavy and weird and honestly still a little raw. When I was 5, my sister Lily was 8, and she died. It was sudden, one of those normal days that just snaps in half. She was crossing the road near the park with her friend, and a car hit her. They said she was brain dead pretty quickly after they got to the hospital. A few hours later, they turned off the life support. I don't remember every detail, just the feeling that the world got really, really quiet. My family has always had a lot of paranormal stories. Like, if you sit in our living room long enough, someone will bring up a ghost, or a dream, or that time the radio did the thing. And I've always kind of liked hearing them. It made me feel like the people we lost weren't completely gone, you know? Anyway, the night Lily died, my mom, Claire, was driving home. She didn't know about the accident yet. There's this thing with her old car, 2 little dashboard lights that are wired together. The mechanic had told her ages before that they either both stay on or both go off. There's no way for just one of them to die on its own. If one goes, they both go. She was driving past the road where the crash happened, still clueless about what was going on just a few streets away. And right as she passed that spot, one of those impossible lights flicked off. Just one. At the same moment, Lily's favorite song came on the radio. Some cheesy early 2000s pop song she used to always sing off-key. Mom says it was Skater Boy by Avril Lavigne, and I weirdly believe her because that is so something Lily would love. Mom told me she just got this heavy, sinking feeling in her stomach, out of nowhere, like the air thickened. She didn't know why yet. She only found out about the accident later that night. So, back then, I shared a bedroom with Lily. After she died, I stayed in that room, but now, alone. At 5 years old, that kind of empty feels huge. My older sister Erin decided she was going to keep me company one night. She brought her best friend over, and they both came into my room to hang out with me. I can't remember what we were doing exactly. Coloring, I think, or playing with dolls. But I remember the feeling. I wasn't alone for once. And then we heard something. A noise from under Lily's bed. Not the house creaking kind of noise. Something that made the 3 of us go quiet all at once. You know that moment when you're a kid and it suddenly feels like the whole room is holding its breath? It was like that. Erin sort of laughed it off at first, but I was curious. Kids are stupidly brave in the worst ways. So I got down on the floor and lifted the blanket hanging off the side of the bed. And that's when I saw her. there was a little girl under the bed. She was lying there on her side, facing me. She had medium-length dark brown hair, like Lily did. She was wearing what looked like a pale hospital gown, or maybe a white nightdress. I'm not even sure anymore. But her face, there was something wrong with her face. She didn't have normal features. It was like her eyes were just dark holes. Not empty sockets exactly, more like deep black voids where eyes should have been. And on the right side of her head, there was blood, matted into her hair, like a wound. I remember freezing. My brain was trying to decide if I was supposed to scream, or cry, or just stop existing. And then, whatever she was, she looked back at me. I don't mean she blinked or anything. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt her attention land on me, like being watched from inside a dark room. I scrambled back so fast I hit my head on the bedside table. Erin freaked out. Her friend started crying. I think Erin saw a glimpse of something too, because she went pale and yanked me away from the bed. We ended up all running out of the room, screaming for Mum. After that, honestly, my brain put the whole thing in a box and buried it. Grief does that. I forgot about it. The little girl under the bed just stopped existing in my mind. Fast forward a few years. I'm about 11 or 12. We'd moved houses a couple of times since Lily died. Different town, different room, different bed. Life was still a bit messy, but I was older now, more into school and friends and music and all that. One evening, I was sitting on my bed, scrolling on my phone, half asleep. You know that fuzzy time before you really decide to knock out for the night? I got this feeling that someone was at the end of my bed. Not sitting, not moving, just there. I tried to ignore it, like you do. Pulled the blanket up a bit, shifted around, pretended I didn't notice. Then I glanced up. At the foot of my bed, peeking around the corner of the mattress, was a small head, dark hair, pale skin, and those same horrible, empty eyes. It was the same thing I'd seen under Lily's bed all those years ago. I snapped fully awake in a second. My heart was pounding so hard I felt sick. I blinked, looked away, looked back, and it was gone. After that, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The memory of the first time came crashing back like a wave. I started sketching it. I'm not even that good at drawing, but I needed to put it on paper. Like if I got it out of my head, maybe it would feel less real. When I thought I had it right, I showed the drawing to Erin. She went dead quiet. She's a lot older than me. She's 24 now, and she remembers Lily much better than I do. She stared at the drawing for a long time, and then she started shaking her head and tearing up. She told me, "That looks exactly like Lily. The hair, the shape of the face, even the way the head was turned." She said it was like seeing our sister again, but wrong. Here's the thing though. I never saw Lily after she died. I wasn't allowed at the hospital. I wasn't allowed at the funeral, and I never saw her body. I didn't know what injuries she had. Later, Mom told us that Lily had a bad head wound, on the same side as the wound I'd drawn on that thing's head. That was the first time I really started thinking, okay, this isn't just a regular "I saw a ghost" story. I started to feel like whatever I'd been seeing wasn't my sister. It was something else wearing her shape, like it had put on a Lily costume to get close. And honestly, once that idea clicked, I got angry. I started calling it out in my head, telling it I knew it wasn't Lily, saying out loud sometimes, "You're not her. Stop pretending. You're not welcome here." After that, the Lily-like version of it started to fade. I didn't see the little girl with the bloody head for a while. I thought maybe it was gone. But then my younger sister, Mia, the one who was born after Lily died, who never met her, started mentioning the girl. That's when the dread came back. And just when I was starting to convince myself it was all trauma and imagination, something happened in my mom's car. I was in the passenger seat, scrolling on my phone again. It was dark outside. We were parked, just the two of us. The car was quiet except for the low hum of the engine and some soft music. Out of nowhere, I got that feeling again. You know when every instinct in your body suddenly goes, "Do not look behind you." It was like that, like my nerves were screaming, but quietly. I ignored it for as long as I could. Then I caught a glimpse of the rearview mirror. There was a black figure in the back seat. Not fully solid, not fully see-through, but there. And the eyes, God, the eyes were wrong. Not glowing or anything cheesy like that, just focused, too intense, like the feeling of being watched from the bottom of a well. It wasn't trying to look like Lily anymore. I just knew it was the same thing. The same attachment, the same presence. And for the first time, I was genuinely terrified of it. Before, it was scary, sure, but more confusing than anything. This time, it felt dangerous. It felt like if I acknowledged it too much, something bad would happen. Since then, I've noticed something else. I hate going near my mom's room or Mia's room when I'm home alone. There's this heavy, awful feeling in that part of the house, like the air is thicker there. Sometimes I'll walk past and feel like I'm about to see something I really, really don't want to see. A couple of times I have seen something. Just a glimpse at the corner of my vision. Something dark, child-sized, near the doorway or standing by the bed, like it's waiting. Mom has her own stories too. She's told me she hears little feet running around her room at night, or feels the mattress dip like a child has sat down beside her. She thought it was Lily at first. Now she's not so sure. The weirdest part of all this? I used paranormal rods at Lily's grave once. I know some people think that stuff is fake, and maybe it is, but that day felt different. I asked if she was at peace. The rods crossed for no. I asked if it was because of the thing attached to our family. The rods moved again, like a yes. I asked if she was trying to protect me from it. And again, yes. So now I'm stuck in this awful place where I feel like my sister is fighting something I can't see properly, and I'm just living with the side effects. I don't really believe in God. I wasn't raised super religious, but I've caught myself talking to the ceiling some nights, begging someone to help. Anyone. Because I'm tired. I'm tired of the dread, tired of seeing it, tired of feeling it. I'm tired of wondering if it's going to show up at the end of my bed again, or in the back seat of the car, or standing just outside my door when I turn off the light. Most of all, I'm tired thinking that Lily might not be at peace, that she's still hanging around, trying to keep this thing from getting to me. So yeah, that's my story. I don't have a neat ending for you. I don't have some big dramatic exorcism scene, or a perfectly happy and then it vanished. Right now, it's just me, talking to you, saying, I think something attached itself to my family when my sister died. I think it tried to wear her face, and I want it gone. I want my sister to be able to rest. I want to stop being scared of my own house. And honestly, I have no idea what to do next. You know how there are some memories you're sure are dreams? The ones that feel too strange to be real, so your brain quietly files them away under, must have imagined it. That's what I thought this was, until last week. So, rewind about 20 plus years. As a teenager, I spent my summers on this little lake in northern Michigan. My parents had a small cabin there, nothing fancy. Just a cozy place with a rickety dock and a view of the water through the trees. Around the lake, there were lots of other cabins, mostly summer homes, and a handful of families who lived there year-round. It was kind of a perfect setup for a kid. A whole pack of us, all roughly the same age, spending every summer swimming, biking, and running around until our parents were yelling our names from porches. This story happens on one of those late summer nights. A bunch of us were hanging out on the deck of our friend Jenna's place. She lived on the far side of the lake from most of us, one of the year-round families. There were maybe a dozen kids at first, music playing softly from a little radio, the lake dark and flat in front of us, the kind of night where the stars feel close. As it got later, people slowly peeled off. Curfews, tiredness, parents calling. By around 3 a.m., it was just Jenna, a friend she'd brought from town, and 3 of us. Me, my buddy Jordan, and our friend Ben. Jenna and her friend eventually decided to call it a night and went inside. The plan was for me to crash at Jordan's place, which everyone knew. Normally I'd have gone home earlier because my then-girlfriend, who I'll call Claire, and I had similar curfews. But since I was staying over at Jordan's, I had a little more freedom. Claire had already walked home with some of our other friends. Geographically, here's how it was laid out. Ben's family's place was right next to my parents' cabin, and Jordan's house was a couple of streets over and down the road, maybe a 10 to 15-minute walk from our spots. So the 3 of us, me, Jordan, and Ben, start walking around the lake road back toward our side. The night is quiet, just the sound of our footsteps and the occasional splash from the lake. On the way, Jordan is telling me we're going to have to sneak into his place quietly so we don't wake his mom and little sister. That's when Ben says, "Why don't we just sleep in the tent?" He'd set up this big tent a little ways back on his family's lot, closer to the tree line, where he crashed sometimes just for fun. Then we don't have to worry about sneaking around, he says. It sounded like a great idea. Jordan and I both said yes. We get to Ben's place, slip quietly across the yard, and climb into the tent. We each pick a spot on the floor. Jordan knocks out almost immediately. Ben and I, though, were wired. We start talking about the night, about people, about everything. Ben had a crush on Jenna's friend, the girl from town, and he's whispering about how he's trying to figure out a way to ask her out, how he's convinced she might actually like him back. We're 2 teenage boys in a tent, talking about girls and futures and nothing in particular while the rest of the world is asleep. At some point, while we're talking, we hear it. A faint rustling outside, like someone walking through grass or leaves. We both go quiet. Then, clear as day, we hear a voice call out all 3 of our names, mine, Ben's, and Jordan's. And the voice sounds exactly like Claire. Now, at first, this doesn't scare us. Claire sneaking out to come see us? That's not totally impossible. Risky, sure, but in our world back then, sneaking around for a few extra minutes together felt like a very normal teenage thing. The voice, still sounding like Claire, asks us to open the tent and let her in. I start to move toward the zipper. That's when Ben puts a hand on my arm and whispers, "Wait." He nods toward the tent wall. The moon or the yard light, whatever it was, cast just enough light that we could see the silhouette of whoever was standing outside. And the shape outside that tent? It did not look like Claire. What we saw was tall, much taller than any of us, and definitely taller than Claire. It looked hunched, like its shoulders or back were curved forward. And the outline of the head, it didn't have the shape you'd expect. No long hair like Claire had back then. The proportions were wrong. The whole thing looked off. Ben and I freeze. The voice, still sounding exactly like Claire, calls my name again and says, "Come on, open up, let me in. I'm freezing out here." Jordan is somehow still asleep through all of this. He doesn't move, doesn't say a word. I whisper to Ben, "Maybe it's just the angle?" But I don't really believe that. The voice calls again, more insistent. Guys, seriously, let me in. My skin is crawling. The inside of the tent suddenly feels very small. I don't know what else to do, so I say, as calmly as I can, "The zipper's stuck. We're trying, hang on." I start fumbling with the zipper loudly on purpose, but I'm not actually opening it. There's this pause outside, like whoever or whatever is out there is thinking. Then the voice huffs in this hurt, annoyed way and says something along the lines of, "I can't believe I snuck out for you guys and you're just messing with me." It keeps trying to convince us, keeps talking in Claire's voice, complaining, pleading, getting a little more frustrated. But we never open the tent. I just keep repeating some variation of, "It's stuck," and "Hold on," and Ben just stares at the shadow, absolutely unmoving. Finally, after what feels like a really long time but was probably only a couple of minutes, the voice goes quiet. We hear those footsteps again, slow, moving away from the tent, through the grass. Then nothing. No door closing, no car, just silence and the soft sounds of the lake. We both lie there, listening, barely breathing. Eventually, the adrenaline crash hits. I guess at some point we drift off. Jordan never wakes up. To this day, I have no idea how he slept through it. The next morning is weirdly normal. Nobody brings it up. Ben doesn't say anything. I don't say anything. It's like we're both testing the idea that maybe it really was some strange dream. Later that day, I see Claire. I apologize for not letting her into the tent and for messing around the night before. She just stares at me. "What are you talking about?" she says. "I thought you were staying at Jordan's." I tell her, "We changed plans. We slept in Ben's tent instead." And she just shakes her head and says, "I never went over there. I didn't sneak out last night." She says it so plainly that I immediately feel this cold little knot in my stomach. Her sister backs her up later, says Claire never left their room, that they'd gone to bed and stayed there. Back then, if Claire had been sneaking out, she would have told her sister so she could cover for her. They were a team like that. And here's the part that really gets me. The only people who knew that Jordan and I ended up staying at Ben's place, in that tent, were the three of us. This was before everyone had smartphones. No GPS tracking, no location sharing. Texts were expensive, so nobody was casually messaging updates all night. Once we left Jenna's, none of us called or texted anyone. Life moved on. Ben's family lost their cabin to property taxes the next summer. I lost touch with him after that. Jordan and I stayed friends for a couple of summers, then drifted. Claire and I did that on-again, off-again thing for a year or two. We never brought up that night. I honestly stopped thinking about it. Fast forward to adulthood. Most of us from the lake eventually added each other on social media. We'd like each other's posts sometimes, maybe exchange a message now and then, but that was about it. Surface-level contact. Jordan, sadly, died a few years after that summer in a crash that wasn't his fault. One of the last times I saw everyone from the lake in person was at his funeral. That alone is a heavy memory. Then, just last week, I'm messaging Ben on Facebook. We're talking about the Lions, because of course we're still Detroit fans, gluttons for punishment. And out of nowhere he says something like, "Remember that night we were idiots and wouldn't let Claire into the tent?" And I just stop. My stomach drops. I type back, "Wait, you remember that?" He's like, "Yeah, man. When we were up late talking about me trying to hook up with Jenna's friend, you and me whispering about it. And then Claire came to the tent. That was so freaky." So I ask, "Are you sure? I always thought I dreamed that." And Ben goes into detail. He describes exactly what I saw. The height, the way it was hunched, the short hair, the way the outline didn't look like Claire at all. He even mentions how still Jordan was, just knocked out while we were whispering. He says something like, "I always thought maybe I made that up in my head, and I was kind of bringing it up just to see if you'd remember it too. In that moment, whatever comfort I had in thinking it was just a dream evaporates. We didn't share some vague impression. We remembered the same specific, strange details. We are both absolutely certain about two things. The silhouette outside that tent did not look like Claire. The voice sounded exactly like her. We never had anything like that happen again. Not before, not after. And as far as we know, nobody else on the lake ever told a story like that either. If they did, we never heard it. After that conversation with Ben, I started reading up on some of the folklore I'd heard mentioned in passing. Things like skinwalkers and wendigos. I'd never paid much attention to that stuff before. From what I could find, our location and the description seemed closer to the stories people tell about wendigos than skinwalkers, at least geographically and culturally. Do I want to believe in that? Not really. I'm not a big paranormal person. I'm the type who likes rational explanations. But in this case, I don't have one. Something that night knew where we were, knew our names, knew my girlfriend's voice well enough to copy it, and it stood outside that tent, in the dark, trying to get us to let it in. I spent 20 years telling myself it was just a strange, vivid dream. Now I know I wasn't the only one who saw it. Okay, so, hey, I'm Mara, I'm 20, and my fiancé, his name's Lucas, he's 21, and we are honestly terrified right now. I'm just going to talk to you like we're on the phone, because I still feel a little crazy saying this out loud. So, a few months ago, we moved into my grandparents' old trailer. It's this beat-up double-wide tucked way back in the woods. There are like 3 other trailers on the whole road, and that's it. No streetlights, no neighbors walking their dogs, just trees and quiet and stars. I grew up coming out here on weekends. To me, it was always just Grandma's place, you know? A little run-down, smells like old books and pine cleaner, but safe, familiar. For Lucas, though, this was all brand new. He grew up in a suburb where the loudest thing at night was a car going by. So we move in, rent is cheap, we have the place to ourselves, and for the first week or so, it's actually kind of cozy. Creaky, but cozy. Then stuff starts happening. The first time, Lucas was in the back of the trailer, near the small bedroom window that faces the woods. I'm in the living room, and he suddenly goes, "Mara, I just saw something run past the window." And I'm like, okay, relax, it's probably a raccoon. Because out here, everything is a raccoon until proven otherwise. He swears up and down it was bigger, faster, wrong somehow. I joke about him watching too many horror movies, and we shrug it off. A few nights later, I'm in the kitchen. Our kitchen is at the front of the trailer, and there's this long wall of windows right next to the counter. They're covered with these thin white curtains you can sort of see through if the light hits them right. I'm cooking, just zoning out, and our kitten, Clover, is losing her mind at the windows. She's hopping up on the sill, tail puffed, making that weird little chattering noise cats make when they see birds. I think, okay, there's probably a moth or something. I don't even look up. Lucas walks in behind me and his whole body goes tense. I can feel him freeze before he even says anything. He whispers, kind of urgent, "There, it's back. Do you see it this time?" I'm like, "See what?" And as I turn toward the windows, I catch just the back half of something bolting past. And I mean bolting. I only see it for a second, but that second hits me like a truck. All I can make out is this lanky gray body with patchy fur and these long, skinny legs. It's too tall for a coyote, too. Stretched out. The proportions are wrong. And the speed, like, blink and it's gone fast. I just stand there with the spatula in my hand, staring, and my stomach drops. Lucas looks at me and goes, "You saw it, didn't you?" And I can't even talk. I just nod. That was the last time either of us actually saw it. But we definitely did not stop hearing it. At first I tried to be logical. I told myself, maybe it's some big stray dog, even though our landlord is super strict and doesn't allow dogs at all. We're in a southern state, no wolves around here, and coyotes. I mean, I've seen coyotes. This thing was bigger, taller. But you start trying to convince yourself you're overreacting, because the alternative, that there's something out there you can't explain, is worse. Then Halloween night happened. So Halloween, I get home from work around 10:30 p.m. It's chilly, dark, and I'm already a little on edge because, well, Halloween in the middle of the woods? Not the coziest vibe. Lucas and I decide to lean into it and put on a horror movie. We make popcorn, turn off most of the lights, the whole cliché. Halfway through the movie, he suddenly hits pause. I look over like, "Dude, why'd you stop it?" "Shh, listen." At first, I don't hear anything. It's so quiet in the trailer you can basically hear the fridge humming. He waits, then shakes his head and goes, "Never mind, maybe I imagined it," and hits play again. Not even a minute later, I hear it. It's this soft, deliberate sound coming from the back of the trailer, the direction of the mudroom and the back door. At first, it's just a faint metallic click. Then I realize exactly what it is. The back doorknob, slowly turning. You know the sound a doorknob makes when someone tries it and it hits that tiny bit of resistance because it's locked? That tiny clunk? It's that. Over and over. Like something is testing it. I mute the TV. We both just sit there, not even breathing, listening. The knob rattles again, a little harder. I whisper, "We locked it, right?" Even though we always lock the doors. Out here, you just do. There's nobody around, but you still do. Lucas doesn't answer. He just stands up and heads down the hallway toward the back. Our bedroom is right next to that door, and he keeps an old baseball bat leaning against the nightstand. Just in case, human problems, not whatever this is. A few seconds later, he comes back with the bat in his hand, jaw clenched, and positions himself by the hallway so he can see down toward the back door. We stand there in total silence. The trailer suddenly feels very small. Nothing. No footsteps, no more rattling. Just that heavy kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. After a minute, he exhales and says, "Maybe it was the wind." I'm thinking, the wind does not twist doorknobs, but I don't say it. We go back to the couch. He sets the bat next to him, hits play, and I swear to you, the second he fully relaxes into the cushions, rattle. Louder this time. The doorknob at the back of the trailer jerks like someone is really trying it now. My eyes fill up with tears instantly. I'm not even trying to act tough anymore. I grab his arm and just shake my head like, "Nope, nope, nope." He looks at me and says, "I'm going out there." I whisper, "Please don't." But he's already up. And because I'm apparently a genius, I decide that if he's going, I'm not staying alone in the dark living room. So I grab my phone, turn on the flashlight, and follow him. We step outside through the front door. The back door is the one being messed with, and the air is cold in that way that hurts your lungs a little. The woods are just there, all around us. Too dark, too quiet. We walk the path along the side of the trailer, our footsteps crunching on gravel. Lucas has the bat in his hands, knuckles white. I'm sweeping the flashlight beam along the siding, the trees, the ground. We get to the back corner, where the steps are up to the back door. The doormat is slightly crooked from earlier, but that's it. No footprints in the dirt. No broken branches. No sign anyone's been there at all. We do a full lap around the trailer. Nothing. No animal eyes shining back at us. No rustling in the bushes. Nothing out of place. Just that feeling, like something is watching us from just out of sight. We go back inside, lock both doors again, double-check the windows. The rest of the night is quiet, but it doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like the quiet after something laughs at you and walks away. Ever since then, it's been this constant low-level torment. Some nights, there are little taps on the windows. Not big bangs, not branches in the wind, just these soft, deliberate taps. Sometimes it'll be one on the side window of the living room. Then, 5 minutes later, one on the bedroom window, like it's moving around the trailer, circling. Then, last night, it leveled up. We were both in bed, not asleep, just kind of scrolling on our phones because we're too wired to settle down. And from above us, on the tin roof, we hear it. Step. Not like a branch falling or an acorn hitting. A step. Then another. If you've ever been in a place with a tin roof, you know, anything up there sounds way louder than it should. A squirrel running around sounds like a toddler. This didn't sound like a squirrel. It was slower, heavier. The spacing between the steps was wrong for something small. It walks across the roof. We track the sound with our eyes like we can see through the ceiling. It goes from above the bedroom toward the middle of the trailer, then stops. We're lying there, holding hands so tight it hurts, and neither of us is brave enough to move. We don't talk. We barely breathe. Then, right over the living room area, something scrapes. Just once. Like claws or something hard dragging across metal. I wish I was exaggerating. I really do. We didn't sleep at all after that. We just waited for the sun to start turning the windows gray instead of black. I don't think I've ever been so happy to hear birds in my life. So, that's where we are. We're in this old trailer in the woods. We've seen something that doesn't look like anything we recognize running past our windows. We've heard the doorknob turning when no one is there, taps circling the walls like it's playing with us, and now, footsteps on the roof. We're exhausted. We're jumpy at every little sound. And I keep going back and forth between, it has to be some weird animal, and what if it's not? I know this all sounds wild. If someone else told me this, I'd probably be like, okay, calm down. Maybe it's just a stray dog and some raccoons. But I've lived here before. I know what the normal sounds are. This is not that. So I'm telling you all of this because I don't know what else to do. If you've ever heard of anything like this, or you have any idea what could be messing with us like this, and how to make it leave us alone, I am all ears. Because right now, it feels like something is out there in the dark, just waiting for us to let our guard down. So, let me just talk to you like we're having coffee, because that's honestly what this feels like I need right now. Over the spring, I started a new job as a full-time nanny for 2 little boys. I'll call them Jonah, the toddler, and Milo, the baby. Their parents, Emma and Chris, are super kind. The pay is good. The schedule is early but manageable. On paper, it's perfect. But from the very first week, the house itself felt different. I've always been a little sensitive to vibes, I guess. I don't see things. I don't have visions or anything dramatic like that, but I pick up on energy. And this house just never felt normal. It doesn't feel evil, not like horror movie evil. It's more like walking into a room where an argument just ended 10 minutes ago. The air feels heavy, but everyone's smiling like nothing happened. That's the closest way I can explain it. Anyway, the first actual thing happened about a week in. The house is a split level, and the main living room opens into this little play area right by the stairs. That's where we spend most of our day, surrounded by blocks and stuffed animals and those plastic toys that all somehow manage to be loud in their own special way. One afternoon, I was on the floor with Jonah and Milo in the play area. The TV was off, the boys were babbling and playing, nothing unusual. And then, clear as day, I heard a woman's voice coming from the living room. It was soft, kind of like someone talking from another room with the door almost closed. I couldn't understand any words. It was more like muffled speech, but it was definitely a voice. I actually paused and turned, expecting to see Emma back early from work or maybe a neighbor at the door. There was nobody. No TV on, no tablet, no open window with someone talking outside. Just the boys and me in the house. I tried to brush it off. You know how you tell yourself, maybe it was a car outside, or maybe I imagined it. I did that. I wanted it to be something normal. A few days later, weird turned into really weird. In the living room, they had a few of those chunky toddler toys, the kind that only make noise if you push a button. No motion sensor, nothing fancy. They'd been sitting there untouched for a while. One morning, I got to the house around 5:45 a.m. The boys were still asleep upstairs, the whole house dark and quiet. I sat on the couch in the living room, lights off, scrolling my phone while I waited for someone to wake up. It was dead silent except for the little sounds from my phone. And then one of the button toys just started talking. I froze for a second, then told myself, okay, maybe the button is super sensitive. I tried really hard not to be dramatic about it, but about 30 seconds later, it went off again, and then again. So I got up, turned on a lamp, and went over to it. I picked it up, shook it a little, pressed the button myself. It worked normally. It clearly wasn't motion activated. In fact, it was the kind that sits there silently unless you really poke at it. Later on, another toy started doing similar things, but that one was motion activated, which somehow made it creepier. It would go off randomly when no one was near it, no one moving around it, nothing shifting. This kept happening almost every morning for a couple of weeks until the parents rotated toys and brought some up from the basement. Once those specific ones were gone, that particular problem mostly stopped. But the house itself didn't. Here's the part you might roll your eyes at, but I promise you I'm not exaggerating. I ignored it at first. I thought maybe a branch hit the glass, or a delivery truck rolled by and rattled something. But then it happened again, and again, faster. I turned around to look, and I saw birds literally flying into the window. Not just one confused bird either. Over the next minute or so, at least 4 or 5 of them just slammed into the glass. You could hear the impact each time. Jonah even looked up at me and asked, "What's that noise?" I paused the movie and said, "Hang on, buddy," and went to check. I went outside to make sure they weren't all lying hurt on the ground, because I felt awful. But when I stepped out and looked around, there was nothing. No birds, no feathers, no stunned bird hopping away. Just nothing. That's when all the little things I'd been shrugging off started piling up in my mind. Because since I started working there, I'd been hearing odd sounds all over the house. Some of it is just normal house settling. I get that. Old wood, temperature changes, all that. But some of it is not that. From the top floor, I'll hear footsteps. Not vague creaking. I mean actual, distinct, rhythmic footfalls, like someone walking from one bedroom to the other. Sometimes it happens when I know both boys are right in front of me in the playroom. Then there are the knocks. Random knocks on walls, doors, somewhere down the hallway. Not constant, just often enough that I notice. I'll be in the kitchen and hear 3 taps down the hall. I'll be folding laundry and hear a single knock from upstairs. You'd think I'd be terrified, but after a while, it honestly just turned into this strange background noise in my day. The thing that really gets to me, though, is the baby crying. More than once, I've heard faint baby cries in the house. Not a sound machine, not the TV. Actual baby crying. I'll grab the baby monitor, look at the screen, and there's Milo, completely passed out, breathing slow and steady, no movement. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it because I'm so tuned into their sounds. But then their mom, Emma, mentioned it one day out of nowhere. She said something like, "Have you ever heard crying when both boys are asleep? Because I swear I do sometimes." We both kind of laughed it off, but you could tell neither of us really thought it was funny. All of that was unnerving, sure, but I could live with it. I had sort of filed the house under weird but manageable until this morning. This morning is what pushed me over the edge and made me tell this whole story. So, here's our usual routine. I come in early, let the dog out, make some coffee if I have time, and then I wait downstairs until Jonah wakes up. When he does, he always does the same thing. He runs down the upstairs hallway, stops at the top of the stairs, and calls my name so I can come get him. I can hear his little feet thumping as he runs. It's very specific and very familiar. Today, I was lying on the couch in the living room, half watching some show, half zoning out. The house was quiet. Milo was still asleep. Everything was normal. Then I heard it. Those exact little footsteps, light, quick patter along the upstairs hallway. The same rhythm I hear every morning. Then, in Jonah's voice, from the top of the stairs, "Lila!" That's what he calls me. Lila. Clear as day. I smiled, got up and said, "Good morning, buddy," as I walked over to the stairs. No one was there. The top of the stairs was empty. I stopped. I felt this wave of cold go through me, and not like the AC kicked on kind of cold. I walked up the stairs, trying to tell myself he'd already run back to his room for some reason. I looked into his bedroom. He was sound asleep. I know what Jonah sounds like. I hear him all day, every day. I know how his footsteps sound running down that hallway, and I heard both, the footsteps and my name, as clearly as you're hearing my voice right now. But it wasn't him. Out of everything that's happened in that house, the toys, the birds, the voices, the baby crying when he's fast asleep, this is the one that really got to me. Something in that house knew his voice well enough to copy it, knew our routine well enough to use it, and that, more than anything else, is what freaks me out. I still don't feel like whatever is there wants to hurt us. The boys are happy, healthy, loved. The energy is strange, but not dark. Still, I can't shake the feeling that I'm sharing the house with someone, or something, that I can't see. So that's where I'm at. I'm still going back to work. I still love those boys. I still make snacks, read stories, change diapers, and sit on that same couch. But now, every time I hear tiny footsteps or someone call my name, I have to take a breath and ask myself, is it really Jonah this time? Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. I'm finally back at the mic to share some creepy paranormal stories with you, and honestly, I love doing this. Thank you so much for sending in and sharing your own paranormal experiences. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any new videos from Paranormal M. Now, grab a blanket, put your headphones on, and let's dive into today's stories. So, let me tell you how this all started. I was staring at this blank page, right? Just a blinking cursor and a bunch of instructions about how to turn a story into a transcript. No characters, no plot, just rules. And I remember thinking, this is kind of like life sometimes. A lot of expectations, not a lot of clear story. But then I imagined you, listening, And suddenly, I didn't want to write something stiff or clever. I wanted to talk to you like a friend. So instead of obsessing over the right way to tell a story, I decided to just start where I was, with confusion, a little bit of laughter, and this desire to make you feel like you're sitting right across from me. You know, I used to think stories had to be perfect to matter. Neat beginnings, sharp turning points, tidy endings. Then I met a friend, let's call her Mira, who changed my mind. Mira had this habit of telling stories that always wandered off track. She'd start talking about a bad day at work and somehow end up describing a stray cat she fed 3 years ago. But the thing is, when she talked, everyone leaned in. Not because her stories were polished, but because you could feel her heart in every sentence. One evening, I asked her, "How do you do that? How do you make people feel so included?" She laughed and said, "I just imagine I'm talking to one person I really care about. The rest takes care of itself." And honestly, that's what I'm doing with you right now. I know on your side it's just words on a screen, maybe a voice in your head as you read. But for me, I'm picturing you listening while you're on a commute, or curled up in bed, or taking a tiny break from a long day. Maybe you're a little tired. Maybe you're looking for something gentle and human to hold on to for a moment. So here's what I want you to take from this strange little non-story story. You don't need a perfect script to be heard. You don't need dramatic twists to matter. You don't need to get every word right to be genuine. If all you have right now is a jumble of half-formed thoughts and a quiet wish to connect with someone, that's actually enough. You can start there. You can start messy and honest. Imagine you're talking to one person you care about. Really see their face in your mind. Imagine the way their shoulders drop when they finally feel understood. Then just speak to that version of them. Like I'm speaking to the version of you who needed to hear this today. And if you feel a little silly or unsure or not good enough at this kind of thing, you're in good company. I feel that way too sometimes, even now, telling this to you. But here we are anyway, sharing this small moment. So if you walk away with anything, let it be this. Your voice, exactly as it is right now, unpolished, a bit tangled, maybe even nervous, is still worthy of being heard. You are allowed to speak like you're talking to someone you love, even when that someone is yourself. Thanks for listening. Really. I'm glad you're here. So, let me tell you something that stayed with me my whole life. My first wife and I met in my first semester of college in this little Midwestern town back in 1984. I was a clueless freshman. She was in her 3rd year, from a small town in Austria, studying English. Her name was Lena. I remember seeing her the first time in the language lab. She had this thick braid down her back and laughed with her whole face, like she didn't know how to hold anything back. I was supposed to be practicing my German verbs, but all I could think was, I really hope she talks to me. By my 2nd semester, I'd been accepted into the States study abroad program. I was going to spend a year in Europe, focusing on German and European history. Lena decided to finish out her semester and then go back home to Austria, so we'd be in the same country again. It felt like the universe was lining things up for us. We were young and impatient, and we got married in February of 1985 in a tiny chapel not far from campus. There were maybe a dozen people there. We were broke, nervous, and absolutely certain we were doing the right thing. 3 days later, she died in a car accident. She'd gone out to pick up some textbooks and study aids for me, German readers, a dictionary, a couple of history books. I wasn't with her. One moment I was worrying about quizzes and credits, and the next, my whole world had been ripped in half. I don't remember much from those weeks that followed. I remember a hospital room. I remember machines. I remember saying goodbye before they turned everything off. After that, it's mostly static, just flashes. I don't really have solid memories again until I was back in the States, weeks later, sitting alone in my old bedroom and realizing she wasn't coming back. For a long time, I had nightmares, vivid, brutal ones. I'd see the wreck, or I'd be stuck in the hospital corridor, unable to get to her room. I'd wake up shaking, sometimes yelling. It went on for years. Life did keep moving, though. Eventually, I remarried. Now I have a wonderful wife, grown kids, and grandkids who crawl all over me and call me Oppa. I love them with everything I have. The nightmares faded out slowly. Somewhere along the line, they just stopped. I haven't had one in close to 30 years. But I never stopped thinking about Lena. Not once. She's just woven into the background of my days. A thought in the shower, a song on the radio, the shape of a stranger's smile. Always there. And then, not too long ago, I had a dream that wasn't like any dream I've ever had. It didn't start like a nightmare. There was no crash, no hospital. I just was there. I found myself standing at the edge of this wide, sunlit meadow. The air felt soft, like late spring. And there she was. She looked exactly like she did when we were young. 21, maybe. Hair in that familiar braid, jeans, a loose sweater, that half smile she used to give me when she caught me staring at her. She was so clear, so solid looking, that my first reaction wasn't even joy. It was panic. I remember thinking, oh God, not again. I can't do this again. This is going to turn into a nightmare, and I can't watch her die one more time. I started trying to force myself awake, you know? That frantic feeling where you're telling your own body, wake up, just wake up. She saw the fear on my face, and instead of disappearing or turning into something awful, she just walked up to me, took my hand, and said softly in German, "Komm, mein Liebchen." Come, my darling. She led me into the middle of the meadow, to a little clearing where the grass was flattened, as if someone had already been dancing there. And then we did dance, slowly. No music I could hear, but somehow we were moving in perfect time. I could smell her, that faint mix of shampoo and the soap she liked, and just her. I could feel the warmth of her cheek against mine. My hand on her back didn't pass through her or fuzz out like it does in a normal dream. It felt real, solid, alive. We danced for what felt like 15, 20 minutes. We didn't say much at first. We just held each other. I kept thinking, if this is a dream, don't let it end. Please don't let it end. Eventually, we sat down on a wooden bench that had somehow appeared there in the meadow. It looked a little worn, like it had been waiting for us for a long time. And then we talked. And talked. More than I can probably remember or put into words now. At one point, she reached back, pulled the tie out of her braid, and shook her hair loose. She used to do that when she came back from classes, right before collapsing on the couch with a book. Seeing it again almost knocked the air out of me. Then she asked, "Do you remember that we were supposed to go to my Uncle Franz's apartment for Abendessen the evening I died?" And she held up a little scrap of paper with an address scribbled on it. I had completely forgotten about that. It was like she'd reached into a locked drawer in my brain and opened it. Then she brought up the Monsignor who ran our student housing, how furious he'd been when he realized we were living together before marriage. We used to sneak in and out, trying to make it look like we had separate rooms. She imitated his voice, wagging her finger, and we both just lost it laughing. In the dream, I laughed so hard my ribs started to ache. And again, It felt real. Not like dream laughing, like your stomach actually hurts and you're wiping tears from your eyes. We got quiet after that, just sat there on that bench in the middle of the meadow. At some point, we both started crying. Not noisy sobs, just tears. The kind that come when you've held something in for too long. She turned toward me and said, "I'm okay. I've been with you all these years." She said the number, 39 years, like she'd been counting right along with me. "I'm happy you found someone to love. I'm proud of the man you still are, even with all that has happened. I don't regret anything." I remember saying, "I'm old now. Look at me." And she smiled and said something like, "You're still you. That's what matters." We stood up and danced again, this time slower, even softer. We held each other like people who know they don't have much time. Eventually, a large car pulled up at the edge of the meadow, a dark, old-fashioned kind of car with a driver in a cap. No one said anything like, "Your time is up." It just felt understood. We climbed into the back seat together. The car started moving, and the world outside the windows began to shift. We drove past places from her life that I'd never seen. The street where she grew up, the cafe where she said she'd spent hours studying, a lake she'd once mentioned, but we'd never visited together. Then we passed places we had known together, our campus, the cheap little diner where we'd split pancakes at midnight, the tiny chapel where we got married. After that, the scenes changed again, and I saw bits of my life after her. The hospital where my son was born, the playground where I pushed my granddaughter on the swing, the house I live in now with my wife. It was like we were taking a tour of both of our lives, stitched together into one long, continuous journey. I wanted to tell her so many things. I don't even know if I said any of them out loud. I just remember the feeling, this enormous, aching love, mixed with a peace I hadn't felt in decades. The next thing I knew, I was awake, in my own bed, morning light coming through the curtains, my heart pounding, tears on my face. I lay there with this overwhelming sense of love, like I'd just been wrapped in it, and at the same time, this strange guilt washed over me, like I'd somehow cheated on my wife by having that dream. It was such a human, messy feeling. Gratitude and sorrow and confusion and love all tangled up together. I'm 58 now, and I've never had another dream like that. Not before, and not since. I've had dreams about her, sure, but nothing anywhere near that clear, that detailed, that present. I woke up with every moment etched in my mind, the way you remember an actual event, not just a dream. You can call it a dream if you want. Maybe that's all it was. But to me, it felt like she'd been given one evening to walk back into my life, to remind me of things I'd forgotten, to tell me she was okay, and to let me know, really know, that love doesn't just vanish when a body does. Whether it was real in any scientific sense almost doesn't matter. To me, it was a visit from Lena, and I carry that meadow, that dance, that car ride with me now, right alongside the life I've built since. So let me take you back for a moment. I must have been around 11, maybe not even 12 yet. It was school vacation, one of those blazing hot afternoons in Suriname when the sun feels like it's leaning right down on your shoulder. But you don't care because you're a kid and life is just good. There were about 8 of us that day, me, a bunch of cousins, and some kids from the next street over. We were playing hide and seek near the forest trail at the edge of our village, just where the houses stopped and the bush and the rice fields began. If you ever spent part of your childhood in Suriname, you know that feeling, right? Bare feet dusty, sweat on your neck, and somehow it's still the best day ever. That's exactly how it was. We'd been laughing and shouting for hours when I suddenly heard this scream. Now listen, we had been noisy all day. Screaming, teasing, calling out, all of that. But this scream was different. It cut through everything. It had real fear in it. You can feel that, you know? It lands somewhere in your chest. It was my cousin. Back then we called him Bubo. Everyone did. And the second we heard him, we all froze, just for a moment, and then started drifting toward his voice, kind of huddling together as we went. "Hey, come, he's coming, Bubo shouted. We ran to where he was, under this huge old mango tree that stood right by the edge of the forest. He was staring straight up into the branches, eyes wide, body stiff. You know when someone is so scared they don't even move? Like that. Naturally, we all followed his gaze, and what we saw, to this day I still get goosebumps when I think about it. Slowly, very slowly, something was climbing down from the top of that mango tree. A man. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Hands, feet, moving from branch to branch. His clothes looked just like my uncle's. My Uncle Ramesh, the one who had died. Let me pause there for a second. A little while before that, during the previous rainy season, Uncle Ramesh had hanged himself from that very tree. Nobody ever really understood why. The adults whispered, the kids were told to hush, and life just kind of rolled on, the way it does. But we all knew he had ended his life there, on that mango tree. So now, standing under that same tree, looking up, and seeing that figure climbing down, dressed like him, every few seconds he would tilt his head and look down at us. And those eyes, that's what I remember most. They weren't like normal eyes. It's hard to explain. They looked empty and heavy at the same time, like they had seen too much. Have you ever looked into the eyes of a dead person, even just at a funeral? That feeling, it's not something you forget. "Uncle dead, Uncle dead," one of the younger kids screamed. "It's his spirit. He's coming for us. He's going to kill us," another one cried. And just like that, panic exploded. Nobody needed instructions. We just ran. In every direction. Away from the tree, away from the forest, away from those eyes that felt like they were following us. I'm not going to pretend to be brave here. I really thought I was going to pee my pants. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Some children sprinted straight to their own houses. The rest of us, the ones closest to my yard, ran into the first open gate we saw, and that happened to be ours. We burst into the house, all shouting different versions of the same story. "He was coming down. He looked at us." My mother, my aunts, neighbors, adults came rushing in from everywhere, trying to make sense of this bundle of screaming, shaking children. Everyone talked at once. Some cried. A few of us refused to go back outside at all. Pretty soon, almost all the adults from that part of the neighborhood had gathered. They argued back and forth for a bit, but they all agreed on one thing very quickly. No child was allowed to play anywhere near that mango tree again. Ever. Honestly, they didn't even need to say it. You didn't have to tell us twice. On our own, we wouldn't have gone near that tree if you paid us. Later, the Pandits, Hindu priests, were called in to deal with my uncle's restless spirit. The grown-ups said that because Uncle Ramesh had taken his own life, his soul hadn't been able to find peace. It was still attached to that place, to that tree, wandering and troubled. So the priests came. We children weren't allowed to be there for most of it, but you know kids, we listened from around corners, from behind half-closed doors. And later I heard the full story. One evening, just before dark, the Pandits put plates of food and glasses of drinks under the mango tree. Rice, vegetables, some sweets, and a little cup of rum, things my uncle used to enjoy when he was alive. The next morning, all the food was gone. Now, you and we can say maybe the dogs took it, maybe some animal from the forest, right? But back then, in our little world, people said, his spirit ate it. He accepted it. The following day, they held a special prayer service for him at my grandmother's house. The living room was full of incense smoke and the sound of Sanskrit prayers. That same night, very late, the Pandits went back to the mango tree to perform more sacred rituals. They lit lamps, chanted mantras, and asked for his soul to be guided to a peaceful place. 2 days later, the adults told us, "It's all right now. The tree is safe. Your uncle's spirit has found peace." Maybe they believed it fully. Maybe they were trying to calm us down. Maybe both. But let me tell you honestly, we children didn't trust that tree again for a long time. For at least 6 months, we made sure our game stayed closer to the houses, where the light from the windows reached us, and we could hear our mothers calling. You don't see something like that and then just carry on as if it was nothing. That kind of fear settles in your bones. There was something else, too. Before my uncle died, that mango tree was famous in our neighborhood. The sweetest mangoes. People would come by just to ask, "Auntie, any mango today?" Kids would climb the branches, fill their shirts with fruit, sit and eat until juice was running down their arms. After all of this, those mangoes stayed untouched. For years. They would fall to the ground, soft and golden, and just lie there for the birds and the insects. Even the bravest among us would look at them and say, "No, you take it." And then nobody would. Time passed, of course. It always does. People got older. Children grew up and moved away. Little by little, someone would pick a mango, then another, and eventually life wrapped itself around the story, the way new roots wrap around old ones. But every now and then, when people start sharing ghost stories in the cool of the evening, someone brings this one up: the mango tree at the edge of the village, and the uncle who didn't quite leave when he died. And as we like to say in Suriname when we tell these stories, let people share their stories in peace. We don't wish to disturb you, so please, don't disturb us either. So, let me tell you what happened with my dad and the house in Suriname. My father lives in the Netherlands. He's one of those people who works themselves to the bone. Extra shifts, weekends, all of it. For years he saved, and his big dream was to build a beautiful house back home in Suriname. Not a mansion, but a solid 2-story house with a big veranda and tiled floors that he was really proud of. Because he only goes to Suriname once a year for vacation, he didn't want the house sitting empty. So he decided to let his favorite brother, my Uncle Lionel, live there. That way someone could look after the place. And honestly, who do you trust more than your own brother, right? My dad had full confidence in him. He always said, "Lionel is different. He has a good heart." He never imagined, not even for a second, that this would cause problems. So Uncle Lionel moved into the brand new house. Everything was fresh. New paint smell, new furniture, new everything. And whenever my father would come to Suriname, he stayed there too, in his own house. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to feel. But here's where things started to get strange. Every time my dad came to Suriname and slept in that house, he got really sick. At first, it was small things. Stomach issues, headaches, feeling weak. We all thought, okay, maybe it's the heat, maybe the food, maybe just travel stress. But it kept happening. Every trip, same house, same sickness. One day, my uncle looked at him and said, almost casually, "You know, maybe you shouldn't come to Suriname anymore. Just leave the house to me. I'll take it over. This country clearly isn't good for your health." The way he said it, I still remember the look on my dad's face. He forced a little laugh, but his eyes were sad. He told him, "No, that will never happen. I'm not giving this house away. I worked too hard for it." He said, "I didn't pick this money off a tree. I gave blood, sweat, and tears for this house." You could hear the pain in his voice, because Suriname was his dream. He always said he wanted to spend his old age there, sitting on his own veranda, drinking his coffee and listening to the birds. But because of this strange illness that kept returning, that dream started to feel impossible. The last time he went on vacation, things got really bad. He came back to the Netherlands, and usually once he was home, he would slowly recover. But this time, he didn't. In fact, he got worse. He slept almost the entire day. He was constantly nauseous, throwing up, running to the toilet, having chills, headaches, and sharp pains all over his body. He was just drained. I would look at him and think, this is not my dad. This is a shadow of him. We went from doctor to doctor. Blood tests, scans, you name it. Every result came back perfect. The doctors kept saying, "Medically, we don't see anything wrong. But you don't need a degree to see when someone is dying on their feet." One afternoon, one of my dad's old friends, a guy named Sanjay, came to visit. He took one good look at my father and said, "No, this isn't normal. Come, I'm taking you to someone. A spiritual worker. She can see what's really going on." So we went to see this Luku woman, a spiritual healer in Amsterdam. I went with him that day because I didn't want him to go alone. When we walked into her place, she just stared at my father for a moment. She didn't even touch him at first. Then she said quietly, "You came just in time. If you had waited one more day, you might not be here." She told us my father was under spiritual attack, that someone had used dark magic on him. She said there was a Jorka, a restless spirit, on him, and also a Bakru, a mischievous spirit. She explained that together they were draining him, bit by bit. She also said she knew exactly who had sent it, but she refused to say the name. She said, "For my own reasons, I won't call the person, but it has to do with a house. Someone wants what belongs to him." And in that moment, we all knew what house she meant. She told my father that he had eaten something that had been prepared for him spiritually, that whatever he had consumed was still in his body, sitting in his stomach like a curse from the inside. The takroe sanyi, the dark work, was literally eating away at his health. Her advice was clear. He needed a wasi, a spiritual cleansing bath, to remove the demonic influence and break whatever was attached to him. My father didn't believe it at first. He's stubborn, and he grew up hearing these stories but never really took them seriously. He just sat there, shaking his head, saying, "No, man, that can't be it. Maybe I just have some infection they haven't found." But honestly, looking back, it felt like even his mind was being blocked, like he couldn't see what was right in front of him. I was scared. I looked at him and said, "Papa, please, we've tried everything else. What do you have to lose? I don't want to lose you." After a lot of convincing, he finally agreed. He took the spiritual bath that same day. I stood outside the room while they prepared everything and guided him through it. And I know this will sound dramatic, but I'm telling you exactly how I experienced it. When he came out, he looked different. His eyes, he straightened his back, and for the first time in weeks, he made a real joke. It was like someone had switched the light back on inside him. In the days that followed, his energy came back so fast it was almost hard to believe. He started eating again, sleeping normally, walking outside. He kept saying, "I haven't felt this good in years." That's when he made up his mind. He picked up the phone and called my uncle in Suriname, Uncle Lionel, and told him, very calmly, "The house has been sold. You need to move out." The reaction. You'd think someone had stabbed him. he exploded. He started screaming, cursing my father in the foulest way. It was like a different person talking. He yelled that he wasn't going anywhere, that my father was ungrateful, that the house was basically his. And he didn't move out. Not for a long time. Even after repeated requests, he refused to leave. My father had to hire a lawyer, start legal procedures, send official letters. It drained him emotionally and financially. While he was still recovering, he had to fight this battle with his own brother. Before all of this, they were close. My dad loved him so much. He used to send him big boxes from the Netherlands, clothes, food, little things he thought his brother might like. If Lionel needed money, my father tried to help where he could, even though life here is not easy. It's not like we're swimming in euros. But my uncle acted like we had money trees in the backyard, and that handing him a house worth a fortune was no big deal. He fought over that house like he had paid for even one brick. He hadn't. It broke my father's heart. His sleep disappeared. The stress came back. The sadness. The worry. Even though his health was improving spiritually, emotionally, he was bleeding. We got the news that my uncle had suddenly become very ill. No accident, no warning. He just woke up one day and couldn't move. He was paralyzed, completely dependent on others. He couldn't walk, couldn't care for himself, nothing. He couldn't stay in that house anymore. They had to move him out. Not long after that, the legal process finished and the house was officially sold. Now, I'm not here to convince you of anything. You can believe it or not. But I know what we saw, and I know what we lived through. People think using black magic makes them powerful. They feel big for a moment because they can hurt someone from a distance, in secret. But there's something they always forget. The devil always comes to collect his payment. That's what happened to my uncle. He used dark forces to make my father sick, to push him out of his own house. But in the end, those same forces turned around and hit him. One day he was fine, the next he was paralyzed, and the doctors couldn't find a clear cause. We knew the spiritual side of the story. When you play with that kind of darkness, sooner or later, you pay. Today, my father wants nothing to do with his brother anymore. When he visits Suriname, he doesn't greet him, doesn't look his way. As far as my dad is concerned, that brother no longer exists. And you know, that's the part that hurts the most. Not the house, not the money. It's the betrayal. To see someone you love so deeply, your own flesh and blood, be willing to destroy you out of greed. My father still sometimes talks about building another house in Suriname one day. Another dream home, maybe in a quieter area, with fruit trees in the yard. But for now, after everything that happened, he's careful. He moves slower. He trusts less. And I don't blame him. You know, by now, after everything I've been through, I've pretty much gotten used to seeing ghosts. I don't say that lightly. I mean full-on spirits and strange little entities just showing up. In the hallway, in the kitchen, at the foot of my bed. I've had them appear while I'm brushing my teeth, or when I'm trying to fold laundry. There was a time when I honestly thought I was losing my mind, that I was just seeing things. Growing up with that feeling was rough. It's hard to trust yourself when everyone else would chalk it up to imagination. But as I got older, and things kept happening that I simply couldn't explain away, I realized, no, I really am seeing them. And weirdly, that realization has taught me a lot about myself. I've learned there are people, living and dead, that I can help. And there are some I just can't. Some spirits honestly don't realize they're dead. Others know exactly what happened to them. The ones who know sometimes love to be dramatic about it, showing up with the same injuries they had when they died, just to spook whoever's around. Others prefer to appear as they were in life, calmer, softer, more themselves. And then there's Elias. Elias has been, well, he's been a lot of things. A protector, a smart-mouthed roommate, and a better friend than many of the living people in my life. He's helped me through so many dark nights and dealt with spirits who were very much not friendly. He's not perfect. He's stubborn, he hides things, and I know he carries more secrets than he'll ever say out loud. But when I needed someone, he was just there. Living with Elias is its own adventure. He's from another time, literally, so sometimes he slips into the way people spoke when he was alive. Then he'll suddenly throw in some modern slang he picked up from TV or my husband, and it becomes this bizarre mashup of old-fashioned politeness and TikTok phrases. There are moments when I just stare at him like, I need subtitles for whatever you just said. Even in death, he's picked up little human habits. I'll catch him wandering around the house barefoot, shirt untucked, completely out of the crisp uniform he usually likes to appear in. The oddest thing he does, though, is when he just lies down next to me on the bed, on top of the covers, and starts talking. About his life, about mine, about things he's seen. It's strangely comforting, like having a friend sitting with you in the dark. Then there's his brother, Leonard. Leonard is the complete opposite. Where Elias can joke and relax, Leonard is proper to the point of being painfully formal. You will never see him in any state of undress. His collar is always neat, his posture perfect, his words carefully chosen. He does not approve of the way people talk nowadays. The casual swearing, the slang, the way we interrupt each other. Leonard has attached himself to my mother-in-law. He's fiercely protective of her. I think she reminds him of his own mother. Even Elias, as laid back as he can be, treats her with a kind of old-world respect when she's around. I know for a fact they've both followed her to work before. At first it was mostly Elias, making sure she got there and back safely. But lately, Leonard has taken that job very seriously. When she's home, he often positions himself where he can stand between her and, well, whatever he thinks might harm her. He gets frustrated when he can't help with her stress or take away her worries. He can see the burdens she carries, but there's only so much a spirit can do. And then we have little Rosie. Then there's Noah. Noah is another young one, and he's very particular about who he interacts with. He pretty much refuses to engage with anyone except Leonard and Rosie. He'll peek around corners, watch us from doorways, then vanish the second we look directly at him. He seems to trust them more than he trusts any of us who are still breathing. And finally, there's the young man we simply call Sage. He's indigenous, quiet, and very watchful. Sage rarely leaves my mother-in-law's room. Most of the time, he stands by her window, looking out as if he's on guard. I don't know his full story, but there's a seriousness about him, a sense of responsibility. He doesn't say much, at least not to me, but his presence is steady, protective, grounded in a way the others aren't. Most of the time, you wouldn't even know we share our home with spirits. If you walked in on an average day, you'd probably just see a regular house that needs to be vacuumed a little more often. Unless you're sensitive to them, you'd miss most of what's happening. You might catch a shadow moving in the corner of your eye. You might hear a soft footstep in an empty room. Every now and then, if they really want to be noticed, you might see one of them clearly. Living with them means their presence is always there, like a quiet background hum. They're never really far away. They make little sounds, sometimes not so little. Doors creak open or shut. Something falls in a room where no one is. Lights flicker. Every now and then, they get bored and move things, hide things. I've had entire conversations across the house with someone I thought was my husband, only to realize he wasn't even home. They're very good at mimicking our voices. One of them will call my name in a perfect imitation of a family member, and I'll answer, only to realize I'm completely alone in that part of the house. It's unnerving, but at this point, it's also familiar. It's just life with them. They are my ghosts, my strange, mismatched, otherworldly little family. And honestly, I'm happy to keep them around for as long as they want to stay. So, where I live now, there are, I think, 4 lighthouses along this stretch of coast. Don't hold me to that number, I always lose track. 2 of them are pretty close together, practically neighbors, and the others are spaced out farther up the shoreline. Of the pair that sit near each other, I've really only spent time at one of them. It's the easiest one to reach. Nice parking lot, little path, very family day trip vibes. Easy doesn't mean gentle, though. That place is every bit as haunted as you're probably hoping it is. The first time I went up there, we were walking past the old keeper's house and the cluster of outbuildings. It was one of those gray coastal days where the clouds feel low enough to brush your hair. As we passed the keeper's house, I suddenly felt watched. Not just a little curious glance either. It felt like a whole crowd pressed up against invisible windows, staring out at me. I could feel men, women, and a few kids. The feeling of them wasn't scary, more like that quiet, watchful energy you get in an old museum where people are used to just observing. I'm used to spirits watching the living, so that part didn't really rattle me. But from one of the upper rooms of the house, there was this other presence. A woman. Sharp, focused, furious. She felt like hot metal, controlled but on the edge of snapping. She was not happy I was there. It wasn't a go away feeling so much as a how dare you walk past my window kind of anger. I noticed her, clocked that fury, and just didn't engage. I turned my attention back to the path and kept walking toward the lighthouse. Now, like a lot of lighthouses, this one is surrounded by cliffs. Beautiful, dramatic cliffs. The kind you see on postcards. And, unfortunately, the kind people still jump from. To be fair to whoever's in charge of the place now, pretty sure it's the state working with the Coast Guard. There's a fence up around the worst drop-offs. There are warning signs, too. Danger. Keep out. Fines posted for crossing the barrier. They've even put up a couple of those signs with the suicide prevention hotline. You can tell someone has tried, really tried, to make it safer. But you and I both know signs don't stop everyone whose mind is already made up. Over time, I've seen a few jumpers there, but only as ghosts. I've also seen spirits of people who clearly just didn't respect how slick those wet rocks can get. The sea doesn't care if you slipped by accident or jumped on purpose. Since that first visit, I've learned bits and pieces about that particular lighthouse. Some of it's local lore, some might be half-remembered history, so take it with a grain of salt. But here's what I've been told. There was a keeper whose wife supposedly threw herself from the cliffs after finding out he'd been unfaithful. Another woman, she wasn't connected to the lighthouse staff at all, came there because her husband never returned from a voyage. She too is said to have jumped. Some of the children I feel around the property are believed to have died from illness or from playing too close to the cliffs and falling. There's talk of at least one keeper who died of sickness, worn down by the isolation and the weather. And then there's the darker story. One keeper who, according to the rumors, killed his wife and child inside the lightkeeper's house. No one can agree on the exact details, but the story lingers like a stain. I can't tell you which of those tales are historically accurate, but I can tell you what I've personally experienced there. My friend Milo, he's sensitive too, will sometimes talk softly to them. He doesn't always get clear answers, but the energy around him shifts, like they're grateful someone sees them. Inside the keeper's house, there is something very negative. I don't mean grumpy old man energy. I mean heavy, oppressive, like walking into a room that hasn't forgiven anyone for anything. I can't say for sure it's connected to that murder story, but the house feels saturated. That angry woman in the upper room, I'm pretty sure she's part of it. And then there are a few entities around the grounds that I can't categorize. They don't feel like former lighthouse staff, and they don't feel like lost tourists. They're just there. Old, watchful, hard to read. The woods around the lighthouse are their own story. If you walk past the keeper's house and into the trees, it changes. The air gets still in that way where you suddenly become aware of every twig under your feet. In those woods, I've felt the steady, quiet gaze of indigenous people. There's respect there, but also caution, like they're watching to see what kind of visitor you're going to be. I've also picked up on soldiers, men in old uniforms, disciplined but tired, lingering around shapes and shadows that feel like buried buildings. There are some half-swallowed foundations out there, tucked into the undergrowth. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some kind of small tactical fort there at one point. It would explain the military energy, the feeling of strategy hanging in the air. As for the indigenous spirits, I think we both understand why they're wary. This land remembers what was done to them. They have every right to watch us from the trees. And then there's something else in those woods. That one I can't pin down. Sometimes I'll get the sense of a large presence moving between the trunks, bigger than a person, lighter on its feet than it should be. It doesn't feel cruel, just deeply elusive. It could be a woodland spirit. It could be something older than any of the human stories tied to the lighthouse. Or, and I promise I'm not joking here, it could be a Sasquatch. Whenever I try to really focus on it, to get a clear read or even catch a good look, it vanishes. The feeling just, poof, slips out of reach, like it was never there at all. I live in Washington State, so the idea of Sasquatch being out there doesn't feel far-fetched to me. I believed in Bigfoot long before I moved here. I grew up near the Appalachian Mountains, and the woods there have their own tall, dark shapes and unexplainable sounds. The Pacific Northwest just feels like a continuation of that mystery. More moss, more fog, same old secret. So that's my lighthouse. On the surface, it's a pretty little tourist spot with a gift shop and informational plaques. But if you stand still long enough, if you let yourself really feel the place, you'll notice you're not alone. You're sharing space with heartbroken women, curious children, stern keepers, wary warriors, and something enormous slipping between the trees, just out of sight. And somehow, knowing they're all still there makes the beam of that lighthouse feel even more important. It's not just guiding ships anymore. It's watching over everyone who never really left. So, since it's Halloween, well, whatever you call it, All Hallows Eve, Samhain, I figured I'd finally tell this story out loud. Halloween has always been my favorite day of the year. Always has been, probably always will be. I've had a lot of weird stuff happen on this night, like more than my fair share. But this one still makes my stomach twist a little when I think about it. So, picture this. I'm about 16, living in this small city. Not tiny, not huge, just big enough to feel like there's always someone awake, and small enough that you still know which houses give out the good candy. That night, I was out with a bunch of my friends, doing the usual Halloween nonsense. Costumes, trick-or-treating, stealing each other's candy, jumping out of bushes to scare kids who were younger than us. That was mostly them, not me, just for the record. I like to pretend I was the responsible one. Growing up, I technically had a curfew, but my dad was pretty relaxed about it on holidays. The funny thing is, I'm usually in bed by 10 like someone's tired grandparent. But that night I decided, very dramatically, that I was going to stay up as late as I could. No way was I going to be the first one to tap out and go home. Yeah, bad plan. Now, here's something about me you kind of need to know for this to make sense. I've always been, let's say, sensitive. I pick up on things other people don't. And I've had a spirit hanging around me since I was a kid. His name, well, the name I use for him, is Ezra. Ezra's not some evil thing. He's more like this grumpy, overprotective roommate who lives in the corner of my life. He's pulled me out of bad situations more than once. So as long as I knew he was nearby, I usually felt safe, even when stuff got weird. That night started out totally normal. The city streets were packed with kids. Porch lights were glowing orange, fake cobwebs everywhere. My friends were loud and chaotic in that way only teenagers in costume can be. And I remember thinking, okay, it's Halloween, the veil's thin, but I've done this before. I'll be fine. And besides, Ezra was there, right? At some point, maybe around 11, I started to feel done. My feet hurt, I was tired, and the sugar rush was turning into a sugar crash. I reached out, in that quiet way I usually check in with Ezra, just sort of feeling for him. Nothing. It was like someone had closed a door in my head. He was just gone. I remember stopping on the sidewalk and thinking, okay, that's weird. But I didn't say anything because what was I going to do? Turn to my friends and be like, hey guys, my ghost friend dipped, I think I should go home. Yeah, no. Most of them didn't know about Ezra, and I really didn't feel like being the crazy one that night. Right around then, someone got the brilliant idea that we should walk to the abandoned cemetery on the edge of town and hang out there. You know, just for the vibes. Now, quick side note. Despite what movies tell you, graveyards aren't always the most haunted places. Most of the time, they're just quiet. I've spent enough time in rural areas to know that the creepiest places are usually old roads and houses, not cemeteries. But the second they said old cemetery, my stomach dropped. Still, I went along. Because of course I did. I felt watched plenty of times in my life. This was different. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. My shoulders got tight. It felt like something was pacing us, just outside the reach of the streetlights. I kept telling myself, it's Halloween. It's probably just your nerves. I tried to convince myself maybe it was Ezra being dramatic, trying to spook me for fun. So I looked around, expecting to catch a glimpse of him. Not the way you'd see a full body or anything, but just a shift in the air, a familiar shape. Instead, every so often, I'd see eyes. Not glowing red, not some cartoon demon thing, just eyes. Too high up, too still, watching from the darker pockets between houses or above a fence line where nothing should have been tall enough to stand. And I did what a lot of us do when we're scared and don't want to admit it. I ignored it. We got about a block away from the cemetery, and I just stopped. The others kept walking for a few steps before they realized I wasn't with them. I was staring straight ahead at the gate. Now, in the daytime, that cemetery is sad and a little overgrown, but it still looks like a cemetery. On Halloween night, under that thin, watery streetlight, the gate looked wrong. It wasn't just old or rusty. It felt like something was standing in it, or maybe using it. Like the gate was a mouth held slightly open, and something was waiting on the other side. The feeling that came off it was pure malice. Not playful trickster energy, not a harmless spirit curious about living people. This was the kind of cold that feels like it has teeth. I told my friends, very calmly, that I didn't want to go in, that we should just go home and watch a movie or something. Of course, they immediately called me a chicken. And look, I was scared. I'll own that. But I also grew up with one older sister and a cousin who basically treated dares like a religion. I was not about to back down in front of a bunch of loud-mouthed teenagers in plastic vampire teeth. So my friends, being absolute menaces, decided that since I was so scared of the graveyard, the only solution was obvious. They dared me to go through the gate alone. What I should have said was, "If you're so brave, you go first." What I actually did was square my shoulders, mutter something like, "Fine," and march right up to it. And here's the part where I did the single dumbest thing I have maybe ever done. I walked straight through it. Not through the gap in the gate. Through it. Through the thing that was standing there. The second I passed that threshold, everything shifted. The air felt heavier, thicker, like I'd stepped underwater. The night sounds, crickets, cars in the distance, my friends laughing, just cut off. It went so quiet my ears rang. When I looked back at the gate from the other side, it didn't look like the same place anymore. The iron didn't look rusty and broken. Now it looked sharp, like it was newly forged. The path ahead of me wasn't just a cracked walkway. It was this dark, narrow lane that seemed to drop down instead of up. And all along either side of it, in my mind, flashed these awful images. I hesitate to call anything a demon, because I think that word gets tossed around too much. But whatever I walked through that night, it was not human, and it was not friendly. As I stood there, it hit me. Not physically, in my head. I started seeing my family, my friends, people I loved, impaled on pikes, torn apart, screaming. Not like a horror movie you watch from a distance, but like I was standing right there, helpless. And the worst part? It was just flashes, but each one felt too real. Every time I blinked, there was more blood, more screaming, more of that horrible sense that this thing was trying to show me. Look what I could do. Look what you'd have to live with. Behind me, I could feel it. That same presence I'd walked through at the gate. Close enough that if it had hands, they would have been hovering right above my shoulders. For a second, I tried to convince myself that Ezra would yank me out of there like he'd done before, that he'd swoop in and snap whatever this was like a twig. But Ezra wasn't there. It was just me and this thing that wanted inside my head. That's when I finally did the smart thing. I ran. I spun around and bolted back the way I'd come, heart pounding, half expecting the path to stretch out forever, or the gate to slam shut in front of me. But somehow, my feet hit gravel, and then sidewalk, and then I was back on the street, gasping. My friends were standing there, wide-eyed. One of them said something like, "Where the hell did you go? You were gone for like an hour." Now, I don't know if that was them messing with me, or if time actually got weird in there. I just remember feeling this ridiculous surge of relief that I could hear cars again, that I could see the normal, ugly chain-link fence on the far side of the road, that the sky looked like a sky and not some endless black ceiling pressing down on me. I told them I was done. No more dares, no more graveyards, no more wandering around in the dark. I was going home. They argued for a minute, but I think they could see in my face that something was wrong, because they eventually let it go. When I finally got back to my room and shut the door, that's when Ezra came back. He didn't show up gently either. The first thing I felt from him was this wave of anger. Not at me as a person exactly, but at how reckless I'd been. For days afterward, every time I reached for him, I got this mix of worry and frustration. The way someone yells because they love you and you scared them half to death. And honestly, he was right. To this day, I can't fully explain what happened. I don't know if I literally stepped somewhere else, or if that thing pulled part of me into its space, or if it just messed with my mind so badly that reality bent around us for a bit. What I do know is this. Every now and then, usually around this time of year, I'll be walking alone at night and feel that old sensation, eyes on me, just beyond the streetlights. Something testing the edges of my defenses, looking for a way back in. But it doesn't get to stay. Ezra doesn't let it. And I don't walk through gates I don't recognize anymore. So yeah, that's my little Halloween PSA for you. If you ever get to the edge of some place and every instinct in your body suddenly goes, "Nope, not there," listen to it. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Trust me on that one. So I want to tell you about a couple of things that happened to me. Things I still can't fully explain. Some of it's kind of spooky. Some of it's really emotional. But hey, we'll walk through it together, okay? Growing up, I learned something that I didn't really have words for back then. Not every spirit shows up to scare you. Some feel like they're just there, watching, maybe even protecting you. My childhood was shaped by the ghost of a little girl in a nightgown we called Ellie. But adulthood? That brought someone much more personal into the picture, what I can only describe as my guardian angel. These are a couple of my paranormal experiences. So picture this. Some neighborhoods have these perfect little cul-de-sacs, right? Kids riding bikes in circles, sprinklers going, neighbors waving from driveways. Mine had that too, but it also had something else. Something you couldn't see, but you could definitely feel. I swear, our whole block was haunted. The first time I saw her, I was sitting on the couch with my older sister Kayla, waiting for it to be time to walk to the bus stop. The TV was on, some goofy cartoon playing in the background, when we both heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, steady, heavy enough that you feel it more than hear it. We both turned our heads toward the stairs, and there she was. A little girl in a pale nightgown, long hair hanging down, quietly walking down the steps like she'd lived there forever. Halfway down, she stopped, turned, and looked right at us. We just froze. Then my sister and I whipped our heads toward each other like, "Did you see that too?" We looked back and nothing. No girl, no movement, just the empty staircase and the sound of the TV. That was the beginning. A few years later, there was this stormy night I'll never forget. Thunder, rain smacking against the windows, the whole dramatic thing. My sister and I were curled up in my bed, watching a movie. This was before streaming everything. We had one of those cheap DVD players humming on the dresser, blue light glowing in the dark. The room was pretty much black except for that TV glow. I was starting to drift off, fighting to keep my eyes open, when I saw someone walk in front of the screen. You know how a shadow passes by and the light disappears for a second? It was like that, only it didn't feel like a quick pass. It felt deliberate. The light vanished, and then click. The entire room went dark. "Hey!" I yelled, assuming Kayla had turned the TV off as a joke. Right then, my dad shouted from down the hall that the power had gone out. And then I heard my sister's voice coming from the living room with my parents. She wasn't even in the room with me. My stomach dropped. Because if that shadow wasn't my sister, then who just walked in front of my TV? Another time, I was walking past the basement door. It was cracked open, and I caught a glimpse of her again, just out of the corner of my eye. The same small figure, the same pale nightgown. I backed up so fast I nearly tripped, then forced myself to look straight into the basement. Nothing. Just the dark stairway, the little pull chain light swaying gently, and that faint smell of laundry detergent drifting up. Over time, my sister and I talked about it so much that we decided to give her a name. We landed on Ellie. Naming her made her feel less like a monster and more like, I don't know, another kid on the block who just never left. And it wasn't just our house. It was totally normal. Cozy, even. Then there was a knock at the front door. Without thinking, both my sister and I yelled, "Come in!" The doorknob turned. The door creaked open super slowly, like someone was pushing it just a little at a time. Then suddenly, slam. It flew open the rest of the way and smashed into the back of the couch so hard it bounced and swung halfway shut again. We all just stopped. My aunt, my sister, me. Spoons in midair, music still playing, cookies half mixed. Nobody laughed. Nobody made a joke about the wind. We just traded that, "Did you see that?" look. And nobody went to check the door for a long minute. Even my friend Maya, who lived 3 houses down, had her own stories. One night, my sister and I were sleeping over at her place. We were in the living room on the floor, surrounded by blankets and snack wrappers, when we heard footsteps above us. Heavy ones, pacing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Thing is, Maya didn't have an attic you could walk around in. Just one of those crawl spaces, the kind that's too low for anyone to stand up inside. You couldn't pace if you wanted to. But those footsteps kept going. We lay there holding our breath until they finally stopped. Maya, trying to act chill, was like, "Oh, that's just the man who lives up there." She'd even given him a name, Victor. She said it like it was half joke, half not. Eventually, it started to feel like the whole block was haunted, like every house had its own secret resident. Years later, I found out why. My grandma had a friend who also grew up on that same street way back in the day. One afternoon, we were all talking, and my grandma's friend mentioned a little girl named Ruthie who used to live there in the 1950s. Ruthie had gotten really sick, leukemia. Back then, treatments weren't what they are now. She died young, in a backyard not far from where my house was. Ruthie. For years, my sister and I had called our little nightgown girl Ellie, and Maya called her ghost Victor. Different people, different names, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why did we all feel like there was someone there? Why did that same stretch of road feel so heavy, like it remembered things it wasn't supposed to forget? Was Ellie actually Ruthie? Or someone else entirely? I still don't know. But here's the thing. That little girl, whoever she was, had nothing to do with my guardian angel. That part of my story showed up much later. In 2019, I was in a terrible car accident. There were 4 of us in the car, driving way too fast, around 90 miles an hour, on a road we had no business speeding down. We lost control and went straight into a cinder block wall. The sound. I'll never forget it. It felt like the world ripped in half. Metal twisting, glass exploding, bodies jerking forward like rag dolls. It was bad. So bad they sent helicopters. Not just one, multiple. They flew each of us to different hospitals across the state. None of us even ended up in the same place. 2 of us survived, but not in the same way we'd been before. My best friend was paralyzed from the chest down. Another friend's brain was damaged so severely that his mind never fully came back, stuck at the level of a small child. They were alive, but changed forever. And me? By all logic, I shouldn't have walked away from that. Honestly, I shouldn't have even been alive. Here's where it gets weird. I never wore my seatbelt. Like, ever. It was a terrible habit, I know, but that's just the truth. I'd get in, shut the door, and that was it. But that night, maybe 2 minutes before the crash, if that, I clicked my seatbelt on. Click. And that click is the only reason I survived. Even with the seatbelt, I was wrecked. My hip was broken. My jaw shattered so badly that the surgeons had to wire it shut. I was living off liquids through a straw for weeks. I ended up in a wheelchair for about a month. I had burns on my arm and knee from being trapped in the car while part of it caught fire. I remember the feeling of heat, how it felt like the flames were reaching for me, and then the rush of air and voices as somebody finally pulled me out. Recovery was brutal. My body hurt. My brain felt foggy. My spirit was just tired. But I was alive. And everyone kept saying the same thing. That seatbelt saved your life. But I knew, deep down, I hadn't put it on alone. Here's why. Back in 1999, 20 years before my accident, my dad's younger sister, my Aunt Carla, died in a car crash of her own. She'd been under the influence, just like I was that night. I never met her. She died before I was born. But I grew up on her story, on the hole she left in my dad's life, on the way his voice changed when he talked about her. For as long as I can remember, Aunt Carla was this mix of a warning and a legend. Someone I loved without ever knowing, and someone whose choices everyone prayed I wouldn't repeat. Lying in that hospital bed after my accident, face swollen, jaw wired shut, body covered in bruises, I couldn't shake this feeling that she had been in that car with me. Not in a creepy way. Not like the little girl on the stairs. More like someone who refused to let history repeat itself. Maybe she knew my dad could survive losing his sister, but he could never survive losing his child. Maybe she saw me doing exactly what she once did and decided, no, not this time. I don't know if she whispered in my ear. I don't know if she nudged my hand. I don't know if she buckled that seatbelt herself. All I know is that something made me do what I never did before. As a kid, I thought that little girl in the nightgown was the biggest mystery of my life. Was she real? Was she Ellie? Was she Ruthie? Or was my imagination just stitching shadows together and calling them a person? But after the wreck, my questions changed. Why did I put on my seatbelt that one night when I never did? Why did I live when I had every reason not to? Was it just random luck? Or was there someone in that car with me? Someone who understood exactly how this story could have ended because she'd already lived it? I can't prove any of it. All I know is this. On one street, as a kid, I met a ghost who watched from the stairs. And years later, on a dark road in a speeding car, I think I met an angel. And she wore my aunt's name.